Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web novel Humans Don't Make Good Familiar, written by Archangel98, taken from Reddit with the author's approval. Just a quick note, there is a one-shot by the same name written by a different author. That one was the inspiration for this series. This author asked that author if he could continue the story, and this is that. So, this is a retelling of the first chapter because it was rewritten by this author. Please don't forget to use the usual YouTube gump if you want more of this stuff. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 1. Around me, all that I could be heard was the scribbling of pencils filling in multiple choice bubbles. I wasn't too stressed about the test since the engineering course I wanted to enter wasn't particularly hard to get into, and I happened to be pretty decent at maths. The class was 10 minutes into a mid-year math exam when, under me, a brightly illuminated circle patterned with lines and smaller circles appeared. Startled, I looked up, but no one seemed to notice. That's when everything went dark. Like a slow blink, the world came back into view again. Except my view was full of little royal blue-colored and almost sparkling bird nymphs staring at me. I staggered back in surprise before I managed to regain my balance and look around the room. The roof was just above my head. But since these little nymph things were what this room was designed for, I guess that made sense. To them, it probably looked more like an arena or a school gym. In fact, there were definitely some kind of gymnastics bars and other assorted climbable bars scattered around the room. Turning my attention back to the nymphs, I noticed a couple amongst them seemed to be a little larger and duller colored, like a steel blue and decorated in gold lace that definitely made them look more, official? There was one standing in front of the crowd, what seemed to me to be, younger nymphs. They were almost holding them back behind a kind of invisible line. Well, behind the crowd stood 3 taller ones who definitely looked apprehensive. My attention finally rested on the one bluebird nymph facing me, standing in front of all the others. It looked like it was fidgeting, peering at me with upturned eyes. "Pepper chow," it chirped, and as it did so I felt encouragement, demand, and I should tell them who I am. I guess they wouldn't know, I thought to myself. "Hey, I'm Jake," I said to the crowd at large, waving my hand. The group of brightly colored nymphs exploded in a cacophony of just chirps. The chirps and tweets strongly reminded me of excited whispering when someone does something amazing in a library or situation where you need to be quiet. The 4, who I was starting to suspect were cheaters, seemed to relax a little. Their feathers flattened closer to their bodies, but their gazes stayed wary. The little light blue one at the front seemed to gain a bit of confidence, holding its head higher and walking with a longer stride. "Prit-prit-ow," it chirped once again, but this time I felt submission and I should go to my master. Wait, master? I thought, seemingly at odds with my own mind. I cannot keep awake. Wait, what? Why can't I keep who waiting? In my mind, the back and forth raged. I would flip between desperation and a desire to serve, to confusion and clarity. No, I just have to walk to her. What the frick? Why am I thinking? Go to her. Holy crap, this is mind control. Go to her now. Get out of my head. I screamed, filled with frustration and unbridled rage. As I yelled, the crowd of birds shrank away, falling completely silent. Even the 4 teachers looked stunned. But they quickly recovered. In the silence, the light blue one repeated nervously, "Prit-paral." "I should know!" I yelled again. This time the crowd scattered, chirping desperately as they flattened their wings and flew over each other trying to get away. The 3 teachers at the back were prepared this time, chirping in sync. The 3 gestured towards what looked like a jagged rock sitting on a trolley between them and motioned towards me. This was followed by the rock flying towards me at a speed of a pegged handball. Out of the pure instinct, my hand protected my face and caught the jagged rock, which was followed by a loudly screaming, "Ow!" The mayhem instantly came to a stop as all the little feathered heads turned towards the source of the sound. I dropped the rock out of my right hand and into my left and looked down at the broken remains of the pencil that I must have been unknowingly holding the whole time. It had snapped, and one of the broken halves was protruding a little into my palm. "That hurts!" I shouted, throwing the rock back in the general direction it came from. the stone flew and buried itself halfway into the floorboards right in front of the teacher nymphs, who staggered back and fell over with what in hindsight must have been utter horror, judging by the puffed-up feathers. The fourth teacher was shaking a little blue nymph and chirping something, while the rest of the students were stampeding out of the room. That's when I finally realized the gravity of what had probably happened. Crap, I thought. I looked down at the little nymph who began chirping something again, but this time I didn't feel anything. Confused, I looked around the room and then down at myself, only to see my legs disappearing. Holy crap! I exclaimed as my stomach, hands, and chest faded into nothing. The last thing I saw before the world fading into dark was the little blue nymph staring at me in what looked like shock. And then I was back. Students writing, the supervisor staring daggers at me, everything exactly as I'd left it. Glancing at the clock, I had still had 10 minutes past the start of the exam, the exact same time as I disappeared. I examined myself up and down, then saw my pencil, broken, with a little bit of blood trickling down from my palm. It had almost been a year since that strange encounter. Thankfully, I graduated high school without any issues. I didn't tell anyone about my experience that day, figuring that I would either be laughed at or institutionalized. In spite of my greatest hopes and wishes, I didn't see any of my friends jumping out and saying, "It's just a prank, bro," or "Gotcha," nor even any cryptic lines which may be references to what happened. Nor could I find anything strange in what I ate that day. There weren't any opportunities for anyone to have slipped me something in my drinks or food, so I simply kept my mouth shut. I ended up writing it off as a mystery. But it got me thinking, if I did get summoned to another world, and it happened like in some of the stories I read, would I be ready? Since my answer to that was a solid no, I decided to do something about it. My mild obsession with science and engineering actually ended up helping me in my final semester at high school, even if the new archery, martial arts, fencing, and firearm classes didn't. I may have overprepared just a bit. I was now well into my first semester at uni, studying a flexible first-year engineering and science course, and had started to doubt that anything was going to come out of the strange experience. That was until one day, at the firing range, as I was raising my rented Glock 34, that same pattern circle appeared, and everything went dark. Opening my eyes, there was the same aqua blue bird nymph, leaning against a wooden wall behind it. This time, I was determined not to do anything that might spook it, and risk losing my chance at a proper hello. So I steeled myself to resist, but not to overreact to whatever came next. He chirped quickly, and, like last time, I felt my mind trying to convince me to do something, but this time it wasn't desire to serve or some compulsion to submit. It was fear, grief, and desperation. It wasn't trying to give an order. It was pleading. This time, I understood it immediately. That chirp was a help me. Setting my face to grim determination, I nodded to the poor creature and turned around to the scene of destruction. We were in what looked like a ballroom, one whose roof was tall enough for me to fit, but the tables lay on their sides, broken and cracked, with more of the little bird nymphs littering the floor, many in pools of blood with sickening injuries. In the middle of them all, with its attention fully focused on me, was a massive monster. Massive, for the nymphs that is. It really was about the size of a large dog, reaching about my thighs on all fours, and was best described as a mutant child of a dog, a lion, and a porcupine. The monster tensed its muscles, opening its mouth, and let out a horrific screech. I raised my gun and fired. Seemingly instantly, there was a hole in front of the creature's forehead and a spray of red behind its head, all of which was accompanied by the sound of metallic snap and the squelch of exploding brains. The monster screaming stopped. It stood still, as if frozen in time. Then slowly, it fell forward with a meaty thud onto its stomach. I wanted to help the other birds, but my brain was still processing what had just happened. Did I just frick up? What if that was a person? I mean, it does have blood all over its claws and around its mouth. But what if it was a mistake? And all of these nymph things, how can I wondered, but was cut off halfway through my thought as a single chirp from behind me. Turning around, The little nymph projected a feeling of amazement, relief, and mourning into my mind. I smiled, thinking at least I had done something right by this one, and replied, "Any time." After hearing my words, the little nymph sunk back against the wall, closed its eyes, and lay there still. Just then, I heard the frantic chirps getting louder from the corridors. Turning around to find the source, I noticed I was fading again. My legs already gone, my hands, chest, and then I saw the origin of the chirps. Larger, more professional-looking nymphs poured through one of the doors. That was my last sight before fading away. End of Chapter 2. I was right back where I'd been, at the shooting range holding the rented Glock 34. I pulled out the magazine and counted the bullets. I was one shy. I suppose I was expecting it all to have been a dream or a hallucination. But no, it was only one bullet shy. I thought to myself how lucky I was that all of the times that I could have been taken to fight that creature was when I had a gun in my hand. I almost laughed at the thought of it if I had been in the loo, but my smile quickly faded and was replaced with fear. What if I'd been in the loo? I said aloud. I had no way of knowing when or if they would summon me again. And what if they do summon me to fight another monster, but I'm unarmed? Sure, I'd learned plenty about hand-to-hand combat over the last few years, in response to my last abduction. But if I hadn't had a weapon this time, I had lost my enthusiasm and left the shooting range for the day. Arriving at home, a small flat but home nonetheless, I walked into my room, past a stack of dirty clothes, and sat on my bed. I started going over what I definitely knew about them, and then tried coming up with theories to fill the gaps of what I didn't know. I laid flat on my back and began thinking aloud. They are small creatures resembling birds or fairies. They are intelligent, and they live in a world where they are not the top of the food chain. I thought for a moment about what else I had seen. They have magic, or some kind of science so advanced that its difference is inconsequential, except for their weapons, I said, remembering the handball-sized rock that they had launched at me in the first time. When I'd shot that, thing, the little blue bird, one that summoned me, was amazed. I know that for sure. I then started to consider how I knew that. None of those creatures had ever spoken a single word to me. They seemed to be telepathic in some way, communicating their thoughts as desires and emotions rather than full, proper words. The first time they looked at me, they put in my head the desire to serve a master in some fashion, but never once did they actually speak directly to me. I mulled over all of this around my head for a solid hour before my stomach began to rumble, and I decided to cook something to eat. My kitchen, like my flat, was small and left much to be desired, but it fit my personality just fine. I liked things simple and understandable. I liked to analyze something down to the smallest part and know what makes it tick. I walked into my kitchen, pulled out the boiling pot, filled it with water, and put it on the stove. Maybe some ramen and crisps, I said, sticking my head and arm into my pantry to try and find a packet of ramen. I found one at the very back of the cabinet. Gotcha, I said proudly, and turned around to go back to my stove. There was one problem. It wasn't there. In fact, neither was my flat, for that matter. I was standing in a field of bluish-green grass and burnt orange sky. Gold and pink clouds floated and danced in it like a graceful ballerina doing a show for the whole world to see. A small timid chirp came from behind me. I turned, and there, sat atop some kind of railing, was that tiny nymph. In my head, I began to feel its presence. I felt it push its emotions and feelings into me. Thankfulness, remorse, amazement, and most strongly, sorrow. It was terribly sad about something, perhaps over what had happened in that building. I didn't know how else to comfort the creature, so I leaned down and stroked its small, feathered head. I began to feel its emotions even stronger as soon as I touched it. Are you okay? I asked it. It didn't answer, of course, but it did let its head sink into my hand, and I felt just how much anguish it was in. I could almost see its thoughts as if they were playing like a movie in my head. The longer the creature touched me, the clearer the images became. It was thinking about what had happened mere hours ago. They'd been in class, learning what seemed to be new spells, when they heard the shrill shrieks that meant danger. Outside, an enormous beast had accidentally been summoned by another student. They had wanted something strong and fierce, and got exactly that. Just like what happened to me, the nymph tried to cast some kind of control spell on it, but to no avail. The mind of the monster was too primitive to understand and filled with far too much primal rage to care. It had mauled the nymph to death, then proceeded to rampage throughout the school. Most students flew to safety, some of the teachers did too, but others tried to fight it off. They launched their rocks at it, but the monster's hide was too tough. One teacher tried to use magic on the beast, but that only served to anger it. It began slaughtering and maiming everything within sight. The small nymph flew into the closet in an attempt to hide, and was forced to watch as the beast tore through everyone else. I felt the little nymph's fear and stress as it recalled the events. Its panic was immense, but the visions didn't stop. The beast, with its large, quilled back and long claws, seemed insatiable at its bloodlust, but soon it ran out of prey. It sniffed the ground, then the air, then drew closer to the little being hiding in the closet. In panic, the nymph flew out of the closet and over to the beast, which took a swat at it with its claws, but narrowly missed. It flew into another room, where it gathered together ingredients and a small wooden planks filled with markings. I began to understand it now. We had been in contact for several minutes, so I just was now beginning to understand its thoughts. I knew of no spell strong enough to save me if I attacked it, and I knew that if I ran, it would chase me. I had no way to defeat this monster, so I needed one of my own. Its voice was like a faint whisper in my head. No longer was it merely emotions or desires, but actual, solid words, however soft that they may have been. I can understand you, I said, amazed. It pulled away in what seemed to be shock, or perhaps confusion. You can speak, it said, sounding some mix of terrified and baffled. End of chapter. Chapter 3. You can speak, it said, sounding some sort of mixed and baffled. I feel like I should be the one asking that question, I said to the small blue creature. I'm sorry, its small nymph said. For what? I wondered. I'm sorry for trying to make you my familiar. Even after I realized that you were an intelligent species, I still attempted to put you under my control. I was young, and my instructor, he told me that I should continue with the ritual. I didn't want to, but I was too afraid to make any objections known. I deeply apologize. The nymph bowed its head in shame. Why summon me in the first place? I asked. The nymph raised its head and looked at me, her eyes filled with remorse. It was part of my training. I was a student and was undergoing a test, the rite of dominance. I was ordered to summon a creature as powerful as I could, then dominate its mind and force it to become my familiar. Familiar? I'd heard the term before, but couldn't quite place the where. A being meant to serve as a guardian, servant, and ally, the nymph explained. I nodded my head, then I understood. You wanted me to be your servant, I questioned. Part of me was offended. Part of me was proud to be considered powerful. The nymph winced as in pain. Yes. The nymph spread its wings and bowed once more, this time with its whole body. I see how wrong I was now. Naama, as weak as myself, could never hope to master a being so powerful as yourself, Great One. Naama, Great One, I thought to myself. Is that what your species is called, Naama? I asked. Yes, Great One, it answered, still bowed. Why are you calling me Great One? You slew the Borag in a single attack of thunder and metal. It was a ritual more powerful and devastating than any of my people have ever seen, she explained. Right. I didn't know how to respond. My name is Jake, and you can just call me that. The nymph stood up. Jake, allow me to offer my life as compensation for attempting to control you, and for forcing you into our fight against the Borag. I only ask that you spare my people from your wrath. Whoa, chill out. There is no need for all of that. I admit that I was pretty upset by everything that happened, but I'm not going to kill you over it. The little nymph sighed deeply, and its wings drooped. I hadn't realized how tense it must have been through all of this. Thank you. What's your name? I asked. I'm afraid I do not possess a name, she replied. You don't? I asked, surprised. It would be a waste of a name to a lowly 5th-level mage like myself. Only those of great importance are honored with names and titles, she explained. Oh, well, would it be okay if I gave you a name? I wondered. You honor me, sir, but please don't trouble yourself. I am not worth such a gift, she said. Well, I need something to call you. It would be a lot easier on me, I said. Then I happily accept. The nymph chirped excitedly. I looked the bird over for a minute, thinking carefully about what to call it. She had on a magical wonder and poise, so I figured that I should try and do something with that. How about Suma? I suggested. She flapped her wings and chirped loudly. A wonderful name. Thank you, Great One. Seriously, just call me Jake, I told her. Can I ask you a question, Suma? Why would a student need a powerful familiar? For the war, Sir Jake. War? I asked. Yes, sir. Our people have been at war for nearly a decade now with the Southern Union. Who are the Southern Union? Our world is divided into 4 factions. One is powerful and in control of huge swaths of land. The Southern Union controls the entire continent of Ariza and its surrounding islands. They are perhaps the most influential of all its factions, and the crudest. I see. But why would a student need to worry about war? Once we finish at the academy, all students are considered full mages and are sent to fight, Suma explained. I was shocked. They send you to war as soon as you graduate. Yes, this is the way that it has been for nearly a decade. The war is not going well. We have been outmatched since the beginning. So, they need everyone who has ability to cast our rites and rituals to join the military. But do you want to? What happens if you say no? I wondered. I volunteered. But there have been instances of people who were under orders to report for duty refusing to. What happened to them? Some were imprisoned. Others were made examples of. Killed? I nearly shouted. Suma's feathers ruffled and she reeled in surprise. What? No. They were publicly announced as cowards and ostracized by their families. Oh, that's still not great, I said. No, it is a pitiable existence indeed. Those who refuse to fight against the oppressive Southern Union deserve what they get, though. Refusing to stand against an enemy is the same as helping it rise to power. What makes the Southern Union so bad? I asked. Suma shook her head and spoke softly. They've killed or enslaved countless Nyama. Their poor are treated as little more than beasts. Their rich stand on the backs of the innocents they exploited. Any who speak out against their leadership are publicly executed. That sounds pretty bad, I said. Indeed. Our soldiers do what they can to keep them at bay, but their army is strong. Most of the wealth of the nations goes directly to it. We are barely able to hold our territory. We lost the island of Sangu just last year. I thought for a moment about my life, about these people, and about everything I'd done over the last few years and meeting Suma for the very first time. I liked what I'd been doing. All of my study and training. I did it all so that I would be ready if I was ever taken again, now that I was here. Is there anything I can do to help? Part 4. You wish to help? Suma chirped, slightly confused. If I can, yeah, I told her. Even after I tried to control you? Just don't do it again, I chuckled. Of course, never again, she said and began almost bobbing her head up and down, seeming happy. Sumata John this, I think the translation thing stopped working there for a second, I said. Suma slowly stopped bouncing and, still excited, explained, Oh no, it is still working fine. I was singing in an old tongue by people. I don't really know what it means, but it is sung when we are happy. Oh, I nodded in understanding. So, Suma, can you tell me what I should expect if I were to become your familiar? Suma's head craned back as she were avoiding a slap. Great, Jake. I couldn't possibly make you my familiar. I am not worthy to be the master of such a great being as you. You have already shown so much kindness by naming me. I couldn't possibly ask you for any more. I shook my head and waved my hand in dismissal. You aren't asking. I am. I have prepared for years in case I was summoned again, and then I find out that there is no danger of that I basically wasted years of my life over nothing. I want to at least use the skills I learned to help someone. I'm not much of a soldier, but maybe I could make a decent familiar. I... Suma was dumbstruck and could barely form a sentence. She shook her head and flapped her wings. Okay. So, what do we do first? I asked. We need to perform the rite of two. It'll bind our souls and allow us to communicate with each other across worlds, as well as let me summon you in a moment's notice, she explained. How do we do that? I wondered. We need to go to the Grand Sanctum. It is illegal to try and perform it anywhere else now. After what happened, I figured she was either talking about me or the Borog beast, but I didn't ask. With that, we left the school and made our way to the city. Will it be all right if I just walk around like this? But if I scare someone? I asked Suma. It should be fine. Most people will assume that you are a familiar and under control ritual, but you will definitely draw quite a few stares. She chirped in a way that I think that she was laughing. She wasn't wrong. Nobody bothered us, but almost everyone we passed looked at me with either shock or fear. I was guessing anyway. Still, couldn't exactly tell with them. For all that I knew, they could have been flipping me off in their own way. We arrived in the Grand Sanctum without incident. Mostly. I think one nymph was trying to seduce Suma, but she had me chase him off. She chirped happily as he squawked and flew away as fast as he could. The Grand Sanctum was a large, white building that had huge holes peppered throughout its walls. Nymphs were speedily flying in and out of them, making a variety of noises as they did. There was an open, large area at the bottom. Well, large compared to the nymphs. I had to crouch down to make it through. I guess bipedal apes are rare for familiars. Inside, it was like a giant bird cage. Some areas had walls, others were just shells, but most of it was just empty space so that there was room to fly. This place is huge, I whispered to Suma. She had told me that I needed to be quiet, or the other nymphs would think that she was losing control of me, and I would end up in a cage or something. It's actually the largest building in the city right now, but I hear there is a larger one somewhere in the western atolls, Suma quietly told me. She waited in a line leading to the large pedestal for about 20 minutes. But eventually we were called up by an older-looking nymph with greyish feathers and a more curled beak than Suma's. Next, he squawked. We walked up and Suma said, I'm here to perform the rite of two. ID number and date of hatching, the older bird requested. ID 1265569-741. I was hatched on the second Famwath 12 years ago. Oh, and my name is Suma. The last part she announced proudly. As soon as Suma said she had a name, the older bird perked up and began talking in a much friendlier tone. Oh, Madam Suma, my apologies for the long wait. We'll get you a room for your ritual right away. The older bird looked at me and then back to Suma. Is this creature that you'll be pairing with today, or shall I get you a summoning squad? This is him, she answered. Very good. We'll alert you just in the moment when the room is available. Please feel free to relax in our waiting area. And if you want, we have a nice kennel for your future familiar to stay in while you wait. I shot him an icy glare, and the feathers around his neck popped up. That won't be necessary. Jake will be staying with me. Very good, he said, looking back and forth between me and Suma. We walked into the waiting area he mentioned, and she perched on a kind of metal branch thing, meaning that there wasn't a single real seat in sight. I sighed. I guess I'll stand. Sorry about the kennel thing, Suma said sheepishly. It's no big deal, I told her. I guess that is something that I'll just have to get used to. We didn't have to wait long for our turn to the room. I guess named nymphs are this world's equivalent of rich people, or nobility of some kind. The room was much smaller than the main area, but more than large enough for myself and several nymphs. Okay, Jake, are you ready? Suma asked. End of chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web novel Humans Don't Make Good Familiars, taken from Reddit with the author's approval. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 6. Okay, Jake, are you ready? Suma asked. Ready, I told her. Suma then bowed her head and spread her wings with the tips pointed to the sky. A glowing, multicolored magic circle formed on a golden floor around each of our feet and began to twist and match the shapes of our shadows. Soon, I felt a kind of heaviness on my soul that nearly fell to my knees, but managed to steady myself and power through. The weight suddenly vanished, and I heard a voice echoing inside my mind. It was far away at first, and I couldn't make out the words, but soon it boomed like thunder. "A name is required." "A name?" I asked aloud. Suma looked at me questioningly. "Did you hear that, Jake?" She sounded confused, or maybe scared. Without warning, a small ember began to glow on the floor. It radiated in a brilliant display of light until it nearly exploded into a roaring inferno between Suma and myself. "A name is required," the flaming figure bellowed. There were several large birds and their animals in the room with us, and each of them stepped back at the sight of this creature. I am Jake," I yelled out, but the figure ignored me and turned to Suma. She looked at me and turned back to the figure and shouted, His name is Sentinel, Great One." The figure faded back into an ember, and the burning pain shot through my shoulder. "Ah!" I yelped, and lifted up my sleeve to see that a magic circle, surrounded by some kind of alien letters, had been etched into my skin like a tattoo. I looked down at the floor, and the magic circles faded away to nothing, leaving the room filled with an eerie quiet. "What the heck was that?" I asked, breaking the rest of the room's occupants out of their own stupors. "I have no idea," Suma replied meekly. End of chapter. Part 6. I lay down in my bed that night, unable to sleep. The image of the flaming figure was burned into my mind and would not let me rest. I had asked Suma about it, and she had asked some of the other officials from the temple, but no one had any answers. I thought back to our conversation after we had left the temple. We were both shaken and concerned. "How did you know what it meant when it asked you for a name?" I asked Suma. Fluttering beside me, she landed on the shoulder that now bore the strange tattoo. I just had a feeling. I don't know how to explain it. All I know is that repairing worked. I can now summon you whenever I need, and we can talk to each other between worlds," Suma said. "How do you know? Is it the tattoo thing?" I asked, pointing in my free hand at the marking. "Yes," she nodded her head. "Can I ask you something? Why did you choose the name Sentinel? Or better yet, where did you even hear that word?" I wondered. "Sentinel, it means Great One. I thought it fitting," she said. "My world is that word too, you know. It basically means guardian or watchers," I told her. "Then I was right. It does fit," she said. It had been hours since Suma sent me back to my world, plopping me right back in the middle of my kitchen. I checked my watch as soon as I arrived, and then checked the alarm clock in my room. There was a massive difference between the two. I'd been gone for 2 or so hours, but according to the clock in my room, no time had passed. Thoughts kept racing through my mind. How am I supposed to beat something like a Borag if I'm not armed? What if I'm summoned to fight in a war and I get someone killed because I'm not strong enough? I stayed awake all night trying to answer these questions and more, but the only conclusion I came up with was this: I can never be caught with my pants down. I began researching how to fight different kinds of animals and the best ways to treat wounds in as many circumstances as I could think of. I made lists of supplies from everything from first aid to close quarters combat that was legal to own in my country. Shy of moving to America, where I could probably buy an AK-47 at Walmart, I needed a surefire way to deal with as many situations as possible. My eventual conclusion was that I needed something that I could quickly convert into a weapon after I was summoned, or learn how to manufacture the weapon in the other world so that I could keep it there. The conversion seemed easier, so I pulled a 3D modeling program to help me design it. The sunlight poured into my room from the outside just as I put the finishing touches on my design. In the course of 4 hours, I had gone through 7 ideas and attempted to build mock versions of them out of what I had lying around. I decided on what was essentially a kind of folding knife that could attach to a collapsible rod. I looked at my clock and decided that I could finish my project later, since it was my day off of work. Just as I laid down to sleep, I heard Suma's voice in my head. "I summon you, Sentinel." A magic circle formed in my bed around my body, and I slowly began to disappear. I reached out and grabbed my pajama shirt and trousers just before my hand disappeared. End of chapter. Part 7. I reached out and grabbed a pajama shirt and trousers just before my hand disappeared. "Ah!" I yelped as I slammed face first onto a grassy ground. Suma squawked in surprise and flapped her wings in an attempt to regain her balance. "Jake, are you okay?" she asked, once again finding her footing on a small wooden perch. I groaned, rolling over on my back and touching my face to make sure that I wasn't bleeding. A little warning would have been appreciated," I said, sitting up and putting my trousers up, then sliding on my shirt. "Sorry, but what were you doing floating in the air without your garments?" Soma wondered. I stood up and rolled my shoulders. "I was about to go to sleep." "Okay, but how were you floating?" she asked. "I wasn't floating. I was lying on a bed." "Boy, I'm sure glad I had clothes nearby," I told her. "Oh, I don't know what a bed is, but you were lying on something, and I guess that makes sense, but why were you not in your garments?" She cocked her head in confusion. "Suma, why did you summon me here?" I ignored the question because at the moment I didn't feel like detailing the intricacies of human sleeping habits. "Oh, right, we need to train," she explained excitedly. "Train? But Wait, I feel fine," I exclaimed as I expected to feel absolutely exhausted after staying up all night and a day. But actually, I felt as if I'd gotten a full night's sleep. "Suma, why am I not tired?" "Summoning a person is basically reconstitutes them in our world fully rejuvenated and healed. It was made this way so as to heal wounds dealt during battle," she told me, "although it can't revive the dead or replace lost limbs." "So I could get stabbed, but as soon as you send me back home, I'll be fine," I asked. "As long as you don't die, then sure," she said. "Are you ready to train?" Suma asked. "Sure, but what do you mean when you say train?" I wondered. "Practice our magics and battle strategies, as well as find out where our combination of magic is and how it works," Suma told me. I don't know any magic," I said. Her head moved back slightly and she ruffled her feathers. "But you used magic to kill the Borak." "No, I used a gun." "What is a gun?" "It's a weapon made to send small pieces of metal several hundred kilometers per hour at an opponent. This usually puts a hole in them, some large and some small, depending on the type," I exclaimed. "Okay, well, you can just use that in training," Sua said. "I don't have it. I don't even own one. I was just renting the one I had when I killed the Borag." Suma stayed quiet for a while. Her beak gave little in the way of expression, but I could only assume that it was either regret or annoyance at the sudden realization that I didn't come with super awesome instant kill moves that she thought I had. "Well, how do we make one?" She finally spoke. "Your world has magic, right? I spent a lot of time thinking about that last night, and I came up with 2 ideas. My first thought was to make a weapon that I could keep on my person at all times in my world, but that is just infeasible and would most likely end with me in jail. My second thought was constructing a weapon here and leaving it with you when I'm not here." "Okay, I think I could do that. But what kind of weapon did you have in mind?" "A stone thrower. A few weapons here, but nothing like your, gun," Suma said. "I was thinking of a sword or shield, or maybe a spear. If I could figure out how to make it practical, I would try and make a gun of some kind. Even a flintlock would work. But the materials required might not even exist here. So I won't worry about that yet," I told her. "What are swords and spears?" she asked. I was a bit caught off guard by this question, but I guess it made sense that their species didn't have things like that since they don't have the hands or bodies necessary for that kind of combat. "A sword is a sharp piece of metal, like iron or steel fixed on a handle, and a spear is similar but far longer," I told Suma. Suma shook her head. "I can't say that I've ever heard of such things." "Does your world have the ability to smelt steel and shape it?" I asked. "We do, but it is usually only done for things like construction. I don't know if weapons can be made that way." "Might as well try," I said. With that, Suma and I went into the city in search of a metal worker and tools. I knew enough about the process from my studies and the years of preparation that I could probably do it myself if I had to, but I'd rather leave it in the hands of a professional. It took only an hour, but soon we found a small shop run by an elderly unnamed nymph who seemed interested in making weapons out of steel instead of just normal construction supplies. I gave him a detailed drawing of the sword, shield, and a spear, and I don't know how he planned to build our order without hands, but he seemed confident that he could. We paid him with some of the world's currency, as well as a bit of magic power, which Suma supplied. I asked later, and she explained that it was a normal way to pay here. In total, it cost us only a little bit of money. At least, I think, as the metal workers seemed like he cared more for about finding out if it was possible than getting paid. How long did them say that our weapons would take to finish? I asked Suma. A week total, but the spear probably only 2 days. While we waited, we spent a week training what we could. We went over potential battle tactics and what positions we could take on the battlefield, and she also explained what combination magic was. Apparently, it was something we could still do, despite me not having any magic. It was performed by my lending her some of my life force, as she called it, and then combining it with her own to create a unique attacker of effect. Are you ready, Jake? Suma asked as she prepared to perform the ritual to take some of my life force. Ready, I said. A magical circle formed around the 2 of us, and then slowly they warped to form a figure 8, and then connected between our bodies. I felt a feeling of cold chill run down my body, and a wave of blue traveled from my end of the circle to hers. As soon as it touched her body, Suma began crying out in pain and fell to her stomach. As soon as she hit the ground, the circle vanished, and I ran to pick her up. Suma! End of chapter. Part 8. As soon as she hit the ground, the circle vanished, and I ran up to pick her up. Suma! She laid motionless and limp in my hands as I carefully picked her up and cradled her in my arms. Suma! Suma! I yelled, and after a moment, she slowly opened her eyes. Oh, thank goodness, I sighed to myself. That really hurt, Suma moaned. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened, I told her. Oh, it was my fault. I failed to realize how strong you actually were, and tried taking 10% of your life energy. Her voice sounded as if each word was a struggle to get out. It was a foolish mistake. I should have performed a free-flow technique rather than a portion one. It would have been safer, but I was overconfident. I thought I could handle it, Suma explained in pain, a tone of voice. Are you okay? I asked. She took a deep breath. I'll be fine. I just need to rest a moment. Suma rested in my arms for at least 30 minutes before asking to stand on her own again. Are you okay? I wondered. I'm fine. I was just knocked to my tail feathers for a moment, she replied. Maybe we should try again later and take a break for now. It's been a couple days. Let's go see if our order is ready yet, I suggested. Yeah, that sounds good, she said, sounding exhausted. I started walking towards the city, but when I looked over my shoulder, Suma hadn't moved. What's wrong? I asked. Could I ride on your shoulder? She asked weakly. Sure, no problem, I chuckled slightly, and carefully lifted her up and placed her on my shoulder. She was short, maybe a foot tall, but while she was perched, her head was above the top of mine by just a bit. We made our way back to the metalworker's shop, which was only about 10 or 15 minutes' walk from where we had been trading. Once inside, the nymph who we'd last spoken to a few days ago perked up and greeted us excitedly. Hello, my unusual friends. I have a part of your order ready for you. It was fun and a unique build. I all but needed to invent the tools needed to complete it, but I have it ready for you. It is the long one, with the wooden shaft, he said as he flew over to the table. He reached down and dragged the wooden end of the spear up to the edge of the table and grunted as he did. Here, let me help, I said and picked it up. Ah, thank you, he said. The spear was very nice, well-crafted and sturdy, but thick enough that I was fairly sure that it would do some damage. It was almost as tall as I was. From the tip of the sharpened metal cone, which made the spear, to the base of the wooden shaft, it was about 5 feet long and had 2.5-inch diameter. Normally, a spear would have a blade at the end, but I opted for this one to utilize a cone-like rod, rather than a blade. That way, I could be sure that it wouldn't snap. It wouldn't be slicing anyone up, but I would be one heck of a stabbing weapon. The rest of your order should be finished in a few days. I must say, I've had a great deal of fun making such unusual things, the nymph said. Thank you, I said. As we were making our way out, the nymph gave a tool to sharpen the spear's tip if it got dulled. It was some kind of stone with magic symbols carved into it. I thanked him, and we left to go back to training. During the walk back, I felt the balance of the spear and ran my hand over the sanded-down wood and examined the tip. It all seemed to be well made and ready for testing. Once we arrived back at the clearing we had been training in, I looked over at Suma and asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine now," she said, and flattened her way off my shoulder and onto the ground. "Let's see what the spear can do," I said. End of chapter. Part 9. "Let's see what the spear can do," I said. "Start by giving the tree a few good whacks," Suma suggested. I walked over to the large blue-barked tree with red leaves and readied my spear. I gripped it tightly in both hands and then thrust it forwards into the tree trunk. With a loud thwack, I chipped a bit of bark and dug a full 2 inches into its side with the tip. I gave the spear a good jerk and wrenched it free. I examined the hole in the wood and then glanced over at the spear to check its condition. There was no visible damage on the metal, so I repeated the test a few more times until I was satisfied that the spear wouldn't break during combat. "I don't know much about this kind of weapon, but I must say that I am impressed, at least," Suma stated. "It did well," I told Suma. "No scratches or dents, and the tip is still intact. I'd say it passed with full marks." "It seems to be a devastating weapon. Tell me, what monsters must reside in your world to have need for such ferocious tools?" Suma said. Well, there are bears and wolves and beasts like the borags, but I'd wager it was developed to fight other humans," I told her. "So your species has many wolves as well?" Suma asked. "Oh yeah, all the time. In fact, I'm not sure if there's ever been a time in our history when war wasn't being fought," I said. "Never?" asked Suma. "Not to my knowledge," I answered. I looked at the spear and had a thought. "Man, where am I going to keep this thing? Your house can't be big enough to store this." Suma shifted a weight on a perch. "Yes, I'm afraid my home is much too small, but storage shouldn't be a problem. I know a spell that can help." "Really?" I asked. Suma flew over to me and landed on my shoulder. "Bring it closer," she said, and I tilted the tip of the spear about an inch from her. A moment later, a small magic circle formed around her, and then around my own feet, and then one formed around the shaft of the spear like a snake coiling around its prey. "You will need to name the weapon, Jake," Suma said. "Name it?" "Okay." I thought for a moment about what to call it. "Destiny," I said, and the magic circles changed from a brilliant blue to a burning red, then faded away. "Why Destiny?" "There was a famous spear from human history called the Spear of Destiny. I thought it fit," I explained. "Hey, Suma, why did I just name the spear?" I asked. "I used a similar spell to the one we bonded ourselves with. Now you can summon the spear by calling its name, no matter where you are," she explained. "Oh, neat," I said. "Try it out," she suggested. I stabbed the spear into the ground and then walked a few feet away. "Destiny," I said, but nothing happened. "You're not talking to the spear. You're calling for it. Don't just say the words. Mean it. Give them purpose," Suma told me. "Okay," I said. I cleared my mind and tried to imagine what she meant, calling destiny with a purpose and meaning. "Destiny!" I shouted, and the spear blinked out of sight, and then, with a flash, it reappeared into my outstretched hand. "That was awesome!" I shouted. I threw the spear at the tree and sunk it several inches into the wood, causing it to stick out straight. Then once again I called it back to me, and I repeated the process several times, cackling like a madman while I did. "It seems like you're getting the hang of it," Suma said. "I think so, but I just want to try something," I said, and tossed the spear a few feet away. "I want to try summoning the spear without talking," I told her. "You want to try shadow casting?" She sighed with surprise. "So you've heard of it? I just saw something like it on a TV show and thought I'd give it a try," I said. Suma nodded her head. "It is an extremely difficult technique that takes even the best mages years of study to grasp. I doubt you'll be able to get it." "Might as well give it a shot," I said, and closed my eyes to focus. I tried to focus on what Suma told me about the purpose and meaning. Then I reached out with my mind and in my head thought, "Destiny." I didn't feel anything at first, but my mind started filling with images, like strings stretching out into infinity. I would reach for the strings, then draw my hand back as they felt wrong, until I saw it, clear as day in my mind, a red string. In my mind, I reached out and grabbed it, then pulled as hard as I could. Once again in my mind, I called out for my spear and clenched my outstretched hand around a familiar wooden shaft. You did it," Suma whispered. End of chapter. You did it, Zuma whispered. I opened my eyes and saw my spear in my hand, a magic circle wrapped around its shaft, just like every other time I had summoned it. Strangely, for a moment after opening my eyes, I could have sworn I'd seen a red thread connecting my hand to the spear. But after focusing my vision, nothing was there. That was a trip, I joked. Zuma, still sounding amazed, interjected, Do you know what you just did, Jake? Summoned my spear, I said. No, yes, but that's not what I meant. You just shadow cast in your first attempt. No one has ever done that. At least, not as far as I know, Zuma told me. Really? It was pretty easy, though, I said, confused. Zuma cocked her head and ruffled her feathers. Jake, I have a question. You said you humans can't do magic, but you know what shadow casting is and performed it on your first try. Not only that, but you figured out how to summon your spear in less than a minute. How? Zuma asked and sounded extremely confused. Well, I know what shadow casting is from watching anime, which is a form of entertainment like a play, and as far as I know, humans can't do magic. Maybe since your world has it, the rules of my world don't apply, or perhaps since you bonded us, I developed the ability. In truth, I have no clue, and we could spend all day guessing, I explained. I can't say that I've ever heard of a species without the ability to use magic, suddenly develop into prodigies. There has to be a logical explanation. Zuma's voice was thin, questioning, as she attempted to figure it out. I admit that I was confused as well, but without any solid evidence, guessing was all that we would be doing. Jake, I want to try something, she said. What? I asked. I want you to try and cast a spell, something that you've never been exposed to before, Zuma explained. Okay, but how will I know what to do if I've never seen it before? I wondered. I will show you it once, then I want you to try it, she said. Okay, I guess I'm ready, I said, not fully understanding why. No, let's go to the Magic Academy that I first summoned you to. There are a few things I need to get first, she told me. We started walking to the academy. And on the way, I asked Zuma why she wanted me to do the spell. I want to see if you can perform any magic, or only spells that have been bonded to you like the summoning spell. Since you've never seen the spell, and it isn't a bonding type, it would be a good test. Bonding type? I take it that means there are more kinds, I asked. Quite a few. There is bonding, which you have seen, which includes summoning and dominations, and can either be rites, rituals, or basic spells. As she spoke, she fluttered along beside me, switching from hovering like a hummingbird to flying like a dove. Then there are creation types, where you take an elements of nature and make something new, like taking dirt, water, and wood, then reshaping it to something usable like a house. Then there is transformation magic. This is causing something to change from one thing to another, like water into ice or steam. Oh, okay, so which one will I be doing? I asked. We're going to have you try do a simple transformation spell, water into steam. It is a kind of magic beginners learn, she said. And what are we getting from the school? I wondered. Is it something for the spell? No, simple magic like this doesn't require any additional ingredients. We are going to get a few things to see whether you are controlling magic around you or producing magic from yourself, as well as other things that are better shown than explained, she said. We walked for a solid 20 minutes, and my feet began to ache. Once we arrived at the academy, I brought myself down on the floor and took off my shoes. Zuma flew off down the halls to retrieve her items. I removed my socks and checked my feet for blisters. I didn't see any, but my feet were still sore. Zuma came back carrying several small stones and a tablet in her feet, and a moment later, another nymph, a darker blue and slightly larger, flew up behind her and landed. Jake, this is my old professor. He said he would assist us. It can understand us, the old nymph asked, curious. Yes, it can, I said jokingly. The nymph backed up slightly, then calmed down and stepped a bit closer to inspect me. You keep strange familiars, young one, but knowing you, I suppose I should have expected it. You always were an abnormal student, the nymph was said, amused. Jake, what happened to your feet? You removed the coverings again, Zuma said finally, noticing my removed shoes and socks. Sorry, we just have been walking for so much lately. My feet are sore. We really need to get horses or cars or something, I said, rubbing my foot. I don't know what a horse or a car is, but we can take the rest if you need to. After we do this test, I can send you home again. You've been here long enough today. Almost 6 hours today and 7 yesterday. Suma said. I hadn't been keeping track. All I knew was there'd been a while. She had summoned me each day for training, but I never felt that I needed to complain, as I was always put back when I left, although a bit more tired. On the bright side, these longer days have helped me get back on a normal sleep schedule. Thanks, okay, let's do this, I told her. End of chapter. Thanks, okay, let's do this, I told her. I stood up and I leaned nestily against the wall. I'd been carrying it this whole time. On the way to the academy, Suma mentioned that I could send it away as well as bring it back, but I hadn't tried that yet. As I wondered where it would go, Suma handed me a stone with spirals of blue and streaks of red, then told me to repeat after her. It wasn't very heavy, no more than a pound. It was the size of a baseball, so it felt too light for its size. Suma placed a bowl on the floor and then used magic to fill it with water. Then she took her place opposite to me, about 3 feet away on a small perch. She began to speak, and I repeated after her, Agno de se pisa. Agno de se pisa, I said. Nothing happened, and Suma looked disappointed. I glanced at the stone, expecting some kind of reaction, but none occurred. What's I supposed to do? I asked. Well, if you had produced the magic yourself, the blue would have turned green, and if you controlled the magic in the area, the red would have gone black. But neither happened, she said. She shook her head and waddled back and forth on her perch for a moment before sharply saying, Oh, of course, you said it in my language and not your own. Try it in your native tongue. Okay, I said. But what does it all that mean? It's a command of sorts. You need to channel the magical energy to accomplish a task, then describe what needs to happen. For turning water into steam, you would say, boil the water, she exclaimed. Okay, I think I understand, I said, my voice barely hiding my confusion. Suma gave me the go-ahead, and I tried to imagine what she told me. Basically, I need to channel this magical energy stuff, then use it to accomplish a task. To do it, I need to describe the task. I wondered to myself if that was all. How did this magical energy know what to do? I figured it had to be of some kind of mental image that the energy used as some kind of building block. If that was the case, then magic could be kind of extension of one's thoughts. I had a theory, and I was ready to test it. I focused on the feeling of when I summoned destiny. There was a kind of gentle, yet fierce power lurking nearby whenever I did. Like a monster hidden just under the surface of a still lake. I needed to make the monster come out of hiding, so I focused on looking for that feeling. In my mind, I imagined standing on the surface of a pool, reaching a hand into it. I felt that same power begin to flow. Soon, it was as strong as when I summoned destiny. But I didn't stop there. I imagined reaching in further, all the way to my elbow, and that feeling became much more tangible. Jake! Suma shouted urgently. I opened my eyes and saw both nymphs looking concerned, and then I looked around the room and understood why. Planks and stones that had been stacked on shelves were on the ground, like a windstorm had blown through in an instant and gone just as fast. I looked down at the stone. The blue had turned green, and the red was black. End of chapter. Humans Don't Make Good Familiars, Chapter 12. Jake! Suma shouted urgently. I opened my eyes and saw both nymphs looking concerned. Then I looked around the room and understood why. Planks and stones that had been stacked on shelves were on the ground, like a windstorm had blown through in an instant and gone just as fast. I looked down at the stone. The blue had turned green, and the red was black. What happened? I wondered as I looked around at the state of the room. When you started using magic, at first the stone turned green, and we were satisfied. But quickly afterwards the red changed to black in an instant, which is highly unusual in and of itself. But before we could get your attention, the whole room was engulfed in a swirling mass of magical energy. We were blown around in the room, and only after managing to regain control were we able to snap you out of it, Suma explained. I looked around the room again, taking in all of the chaos. It wasn't too bad to me, but for a small creature like the nymphs, it was probably like a hurricane. No, I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to. And just then I noticed that the older nymph was shaking and nuzzling his left wing. It was broken. I rushed over to him. No, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I yelled, but I was cut off by Suma. Jake, don't worry about it. Our magic can heal him. Just let me handle it. Her voice wasn't angry, but calm and even. She wasn't trying to chastise me, but reassure me that nothing had been done that couldn't be fixed. She stood over the larger nymph, and the magic circle formed around the two of them. The light began emitting from the nymph's injured wing, like glitter moving in a wave across the surface. Then the wing slowly pulled itself back into a correct alignment. Soon the circle faded, and he moved it around to make sure that it was okay. Are you okay? I'm perfectly fine, thank you, little one, the nymph said and pressed his wings back to his body. He turned to me. You are an oddity I have never come across before in my life. Such power, and in a summon no less. Tell me, are there more like you? More humans? Yes, but I'm the only human in history to use magic, as far as I know anyway, I told him. A shame, he replied. I would have liked to have a familiar like you myself, he said. Jake isn't just a familiar. He's a friend. He even named me, Suma interjected. A name, the nymph said aghast. Yes, I know, known as Suma, she told him. A familiar naming its master. That's, unheard of, he replied. I'm not his master. We're allies, partners, she told him. Besides, it's not like I could if I wanted to. His force of will and life force density are far beyond my abilities to control. That piqued my interest. Life force densities? I asked. Do you remember when I tried taking your life force into myself and got injured? Suma said, but was interrupted by the older nymph. You were injured in an attempt to take some life force. I taught you better than that. Never try taking on a new familiar's life force all at once. With a start with 30% or less, he chided. I started with 10%, and it still knocked me on my tail feathers, Suma corrected him. He looked shocked, then confused. 10%? And you were still injured, he asked. How remarkable, he added after a brief silence. Jake has the densest life force that I have ever encountered, Suma said. It can't be that much, I denied. Jake, I can handle a life force of several Borak beasts at the same time. I couldn't even handle 1/10 of yours. There are high mages and court mages that train their whole lives to achieve what you were born with. And you are an untrained amateur who only just learned that he even had magic, Suma explained. I was honestly bewildered. I'd never considered the possibility that I had magic, let alone that I was good at it anyway. As those thoughts marinated inside my head, Suma and the other nymph said their goodbyes, and she apologized for wrecking the room. I offered to help clean, but he said that the school used magic to clean itself, and that he could perform the spell alone. I was exhausted, and Suma saw it, so she sent me home. I closed my eyes in her world and opened them on my couch, where she had taken me from this morning. My feet still ached, and now I was too full of questions to sleep. At least, that's what I thought. But I was snoring within 5 minutes of my head hitting the pillow. End of chapter. I woke up in a confused haze, my alarm blaring, telling me exactly how late for work I was. Crap! I shouted as I flung myself out of bed, but most of my body was still asleep, so rather than a fluid motion, it was more like a stumbling drunk monkey trying to ballet dance, then falling down. Still half wrapped in my blanket, I quickly stood up and ran to the bathroom to brush my teeth and take the fastest shower in human history. I grabbed a shirt, pants, and socks from my drawer and put on a deodorant. All in all, I was dressed and out of the door in 15 minutes, half an hour late for work. I called my boss telling him that I was on my way. He was chill about it, as this was probably the first time I'd been late in a full year that I'd been working there. My job was data entry, just something to pay the bills until I was finished with my engineering degree next year. I arrived for work and clocked in quickly. Hey Jake, my boss said, startling me from behind. Goodness, I yelped. Oh, hey Mr. Vidal, sorry for being late. I overslept. Yesterday was pretty hectic, I explained. It's no problem. Everyone is late sometimes, he said calmly. Mr. Vidal was a great boss, forgiving, willing to compromise, and good at leading us rather than giving out orders. I've had some bad bosses before, but he wasn't one of them. "What made yesterday so hectic? Did something happen after you left here?" he asked. Not even my family knew about Suma and the other world, and I definitely wasn't going to tell him. "Yeah, a friend of mine called me and needed some help with stuff, so we spent hours working on that. I didn't even get to sleep until 10 a.m. this morning," I told him. "Oh, so you only got like 4 hours of sleep? Ah, yeah. What was so important?" he asked, surprised. "I worked afternoon shifts from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. So normally I just go to sleep after I get home and wake up for college at 10. Thankfully, I didn't have classes today. No, he was having medical issues, so I took him to the hospital and brought him home this morning," I lied. "Well, I hope he gets to feeling better. And if you need to leave an hour or two early to catch up on some sleep or take care of your friend, that's fine. Nothing important is going on today," Mr. Vidal said as he went to his office. With that, I got to work on my computer. My job was simple: take information from forms and transfer them to digital files on the computer. I trudged on for a few hours until my stomach started to rumble at around 6, but I kept instant noodles at my desk to tie me over until I could leave. Just as I put the soup in the microwave, I got a call, but not on my phone. "Jake, are you there?" Suma's voice came into my head. I pulled out my phone and placed it to my ear to make it seem like I was talking on the phone. "Hey, Suma, what's up?" I said. "Are you free to be summoned? I need a bit of help," she said. Not at the moment. If I leave now, I might be too tired to finish work when I get back. Can I wait for another—" I looked down at my phone for the time. 2 hours? Yes, I think you can wait. Just call me when you are free, and I will explain," she said. "Okay, I'll see you in a bit," I said and put my phone back in my pocket. A second later, the microwave beeped, and my soup was ready. I took it and a fork back to my desk to eat. As I sat down, my co-worker, Melanie, walked up to me. "Jake, do you have a copy of the Gracely file on your computer? Mine got corrupted last week's power outage, and they requested a copy to be sent to them," she asked. Sure, I think so," I said and sat my noodles down and searched my computer. "Here we are," I said, and I emailed her a copy of the file. "Okay, I sent it to your work email," I said. "You're a lifesaver, Jake," she said and walked away. I went back to eating and checked my phone for messages. A text from my aunt asking me to stop by after work to get a few things from storage from when I still lived there. They had mentioned it before, but I kept forgetting, mostly because everything that was been happening with Suma. While I ate, I messaged her telling her that I would be by after work to collect everything. I also thought about how much had changed for me over the last few weeks. How much I had seen. It was like going into space or being the first man on Mars, but no one knew. I took my boss up on his offer and clocked out 45 minutes early. I drove to my mom's and gave her a big hug as soon as I saw her. She had just seen me last week, but it had been twice as long from my perspective. My mother was a wonderful woman, and my dad had passed away last year, so she was always trying to keep busy, which was the reason I had to clean out the storage shed, so that she could use the space for her latest project or hobby. "How have you been?" she asked as we handed me a box to put in my car. "I've been really good. Made a new friend, Suma," I told her. "Oh, and when will I get to meet the Suma?" she asked. My mom had been on me for years to get a girlfriend. "It's not like that, Mom. She's just a friend. Anyway, she lives far away, in another country," I said. "Another country? How did you meet her then?" she asked. We met years ago, back when I was still in high school," I told her. "But I thought you said she was a new friend." My mom wondered. "Yeah. I mean, I knew her, but I didn't know her. We just reconnected when we bumped into each other. She works in America as a history professor," I lied. "What was she doing in England? Visiting family?" Mom asked. "Yeah, her parents still live here, so she comes to see them for holidays and birthdays and stuff like that," I said, and we talked some more, and I lied some more. But a few minutes later, my car was packed and I was on my way home. Just as I got home and laid the last of the boxes on my living room floor, Suma shouted in my head, "Jake, I don't know what you're doing, but get ready to look scary as possible." Loud," I said as I began to disappear. I had no time to think. The next thing I knew, I was standing in the middle of an alleyway, and Suma was standing or hiding behind me. To make matters worse, we were cornered by 3 large dark-colored nymphs and their very angry-looking beast familiars. End of chapter. Part 14. Summerstay. See you later, Jake said in a rough human voice as he faded away. Jake and I just got done performing a few tests to see if he could use metric like I can. After he left, I flew to town to take care of a few tasks that needed tending. It only took me a few minutes to fly down to town without Jake. He may be incredibly large and strong, but he is obscenely slow. Normally, it takes over 20 minutes to go from our training area down to town with him. My first stop is City Hall. I needed to file paperwork on Jake's spear. All equipment used by Familiar needs to be registered. It only takes a few minutes. I have a new name that Jake gifted me with to thank for that. Afterwards, I flew to the Royal Citadel. I was now a named citizen, and as such I had to present myself before the Grand Duke for inspection. It is an event that is done once every 6 months, so if I didn't do it now, it would be another quarter of a year before I could do it again. It was a special occasion, and many lords and nobles came to watch and see how many of their citizens get named. It is an investment, in a way. The more citizens with names that a lord or nobles has living in their territories, the more funding they get for future projects or goals. I live in Count Thacoma Isballa's domain, so he will be the one who inspects me and gets the funding. When I arrived, there was a large crowd of nobles talking amongst themselves. I knew they were nobility from their highly ornate feathers and high-quality beast familiars. Their feathers had been dyed a dazzling array of bright colors, and the familiars that they were perched on were ones whose races were known to have dense life forces and unique traits. Not only that, but the saddles on the familiars, the ones that their masters were perched on, were excessively extravagant. As a citizen who was presenting, I was to go into a smaller room and prepare myself. After asking for directions and finding the room, I found myself only amongst 4 others. A child who still had his tuft in some places, an elder with feathers beginning to turn white, and 2 others about my age, a male and a female standing off together away from the rest of us. We didn't wait long. Soon someone was sent to lead us out and explained how everything would go. She flew into the room and landed on a perch in the center of us all. Attention, attention everyone, we will shortly be making our way to the Grand Duke's meeting hall. Once you do, you'll fly in and land on single file on the same perch that I do. It'll be a long, narrow bar, so be careful when landing. Afterwards, the Great Duke will enter the room. You are all expected to bow for a moment, then await your turn to present yourselves. Once you've finished, you'll be led out of the chamber by either myself or another chamber representative. After that, you may either leave and return home, or go through the side entrance and watch as the rest of the presentations with everyone else. Does everyone understand? She concluded. One by one, we each answered that we understood. Well then, everyone, line up, and let's begin. We all lined up, and one by one flew in a single file line as instructed into the meeting hall. She wasn't kidding about a narrow bar. I was only barely able to land smoothly. The young child stumbled a bit, but caught himself without falling. Once we had all landed, the Grand Duke flew in and perched atop a high pedestal. We each bowed for a moment as instructed, and the Grand Duke ordered us to rise for the first of us to step forward. Each of the places we landed had numbers, so the one closest to the Duke would go first. There were 5 of us, and I was last. First up was one of the others my age, the male. He flew to the perch in the center of the room and began his introduction. My name is Quan-Ka, and I reside in Lord Gamut's territory. Tell me, Gran-Ka, who gave you your name? Grand Duke asked. My name was given to me by my master, Kalsundi, before his death. I was his apprentice and have taken over his duties and business, Quan-Ka explained. And what is it that you do? The Grand Duke questioned. I'm a craftsman. I deal with the construction and creation magics. Some of my duties include repairing buildings, maintaining structures, and fabricating tools used for other trades, Quan-Ka said. Important work, Quan-Ka. You have been seen, and your name is recognized by the court. A record of your name shall be made and stored in the city's library. You may take your leave, the Grand Duke said. Quan-Ka thanked him and was escorted out. Next up was the woman that he was with in the waiting room. She flew over and landed gracefully on the center perch. "My name is Selakar, and I reside in Lord Gamut's territory," she said. "Tell me, Selakar, who gave you your name?" the Grand Duke asked. "I was named by my husband's master, Silsandi, before his death," Selakar said. Not an uncommon occurrence. Tell me, Selakar, what is it that you do?" the Duke asked. "I'm a magical scholar. My focus is on rune magic. My duties include creating runes for different purposes and installing them when and where needed," she explained. "I see. Thank you, Selakar. You have been seen and your name recognized by the court. A record of your name shall be made and stored in the city's library. You may take your leave." She also thanked the Duke and was escorted out. Next in line was the eldest of us. "My name is Nook, and I reside in Baron Jaiba's domain," the eldest said in a breathy, strained voice. "Tell me, Nook, who was it that gave you your name?" the Duke asked. "I was given my name by Baron Jaiba as recognition of esteemed military service," Nook said. The Duke thought. It is highly unusual for a noble to name a member of their own territory, but special exceptions aren't unheard of. "Do you still work for the military?" "No, sir. I was given my name once I retired 2.5 months ago," Nook explained. "Well then, once we have confirmed your military record, your name will be added to the city's library. You will be sent a notice once we have confirmed everything. You may take your leave," the Duke said. The elder, Nook, slowly made his way out, and the youngest one took his place on the perch. "My name is Abamsi Verville, and I reside in Viscount Sali Verville's domain," the young man squeaked. "What is your relation to the Viscount?" the Duke asked. "I am his youngest child," Abamsa said. "I see. And was it your parents who gave you your name?" the Duke wondered. "Yes, sir," Abamsa replied. "Do you have a duty or jobs, Abamsa?" the Duke asked. "No, sir. I'm still too young to legally take a job," Abamsa explained. "Well then, as the son of a Viscount, you have been seen and your name recognized. A record shall be created and stored in the city's library. Once you have turned of age, all rights and liberties of a name shall be afforded to you. You may take your leave." And Memza shyly thanked the Duke and was escorted out. Finally, it was my turn. I flew to the perch and presented myself. "I am Suma, and I reside in Count Theracoma Isbala's domain," I said nervously. I felt as if every eye in the room was gazing into my soul, as if to prod the core of my very being. "Tell me, Suma, who was it who gave you your name?" the Duke asked. "My name was given to me by a human called Jake, known to the court as Sentinel," I told him. "A human? What is that?" the Duke asked, sounding confused. "It is a very powerful being from another world, called Earth," I said. "And what of this name discrepancy? You said that he was called Jake, but was known as Sentinel. Why is this?" the Duke wondered. "On his world he was named Jake, but he has become my familiar, and so I chose a summoning name for him, Sentinel," I told him. The room was filled with murmurs and grumbling, some sounding angry, others shocked. "Order in the court," the Grand Duke announced loudly. The hall fell silent once more. "Suma, this is a highly unusual circumstance. Your claim that your familiar named you, while it is not illegal, it is abnormal. Tell me, what is it that you do?" "I am in waiting to be summoned to the battlefield. I volunteered for the King's armed forces 4 months ago," I told him. "You are quite brave indeed, young Suma. I wish you a good fortune in your tour of duty, and hope that you return home unharmed. Once we have checked that you have indeed taken a familiar named Sentinel, a record of your name will be made and stored in the city's library. You may take your leave," the Duke said. "Thank you, sir," I said, and bowed before following my escort out to the chambers. With my exit, the Grand Duke dismissed the event and sent orders to the city's library to create all the confirmed names. I flew home that day, elated. I was now officially going to be recognized as having a name. I only wish that I could have foreseen what would happen later that very day. End of chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web novel Humans Don't Make Good Familiars, taken from Reddit with the author's approval. If you're new to this series, there is a playlist listed down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Part 15. Suma's Day, Part 2. I flew home and prepared to go to sleep. My home was in a large complex made utilizing the area's natural trees and mountainsides. Many others lived here. Some preferred higher levels, others opted for the ground. Homes were carved into the mountain or cultivated by using spells to weave the branches of the trees tight enough to stop rain from leaking through. Each home was decorated with vibrant colors or charms that some believed to ward off evil. My house was made from a pre-existing cavern near a midpoint of the mountain. Using magic, I expanded the opening and flew inside, then turned on the lights by throwing some of my magic into a system of luminous braids woven throughout its walls. They'll stay on until they run out of magic, but that will be a few hours. I closed the entrance behind me and settled into my roost at the back of the cavern to go to sleep. I don't know how long I slept, but I was awoken by sounds of pecking at the entrance of my home. Stretching out my wings, I stood up and called out loudly that I was on my way. I opened the entrance and saw Niyama, a member of my race, but Jake often referred to us as nymphs, standing tall. His feathers were decorated with gold lace and small, beautiful stones. Behind him stood a Zuntorax hound, a familiar, typically used by lower-ranked nobility. "Can I help you?" I puzzled. "Are you Suma, a mage who presented herself to Grand Duke earlier?" he asked. "Yes, I am," I said. "Why?" "I am Baronet Helyard Langres, and I bring a message from Grand Duke Langres. In regards to your name, the Grand Duke has a few more questions and would like for you to come and answer them, if you could. It should be noted that this is a personal request and will not affect the ruling was decided yesterday. The Grand Duke is simply curious." He spoke with a sort of regality in his words, as if he'd been trained his whole life to speak and act that way. And since he was a noble, that was probably exactly the case. I also couldn't help but wonder about his name, as he related to Grand Duke in some way. "Okay. When would you like me to go see him?" I asked. "If you're free now, that would be best, but if not, we can simply figure it out what works best," he said. I thought for a moment about if I had anything to do that day. I didn't. "Yes, I am free to go now," I told him. "Excellent. Please follow me and I will escort you," he said as we began our flight. I had assumed that we would be going back to the meeting hall where I'd first met the Grand Duke, but we were flying in the wrong direction for that. In fact, we flew to City Hall. "Excuse me, Sir Langres, but why are we at City Hall instead of the Royal Citadel?" I asked as we flew in and found a perch to rest on. "The Grand Duke has several meetings today regarding city matters, but has made time to ask you a few questions," he explained. I shook my head, then I understood. We made our way to a desk, and he spoke to a woman behind it. "Please tell the Grand Duke that I have arrived, and I have brought Miss Suma." The woman flew away and around the corner, out of sight. The baronet and I waited in silence until the woman flew back in and offered to show us the way. But he told her that that wouldn't be necessary, as he knew the way. With magic, the baronet parted a wall of dense vines, and we flew into a clearing in which the Grand Duke was waiting. He was dressed far more plainly than the baronet was, only a few strands of gold and no jewels. "Ah, Miss Suma, thank you for coming in to satiate an old man's curiosity. Please, rest here," he said, and used magic to form perches out of vines that had been laying on the floor for the baronet and I to rest on. I landed on the vines and noted how soft and easy they were to grab. "You're welcome, sir. I was told you had questions for me," I said as politely as I could. "Yes, I wanted to know more about this Jake, the familiar who gave you your name," he said. "If it helps, I could try and summon him if you want," I offered. "That would be excellent," he said. "First, I need to see if he is available. He told me that he works some kind of job when he's not with me, and it requires a good deal of energy and focus, so he might not be able to come," I explained. "A familiar that doesn't always come when their master calls. How abnormal," he said, sounding quite shocked. "That is an apt description of our partnership," I said as I contacted Jake. "Jake, are you there?" "Hey, Suma, what's up?" Jake answered. "Are you free to be summoned? I need a bit of help," I said. No, not at the moment. If I leave now, I might be too tired to finish work when I get back. Can I wait another, there was a slight pause, 2 hours?" "Yes, I think I can wait. Just call me when you're free, and I'll explain," I said, feeling a bit disappointed. "Okay, see you in a bit," he said, and I ended the connection. "I apologize, Grand Duke. He is not available to come yet, But if you would like, he said that he would be free in approximately 2 hours, I said. He seemed disappointed. He spread the spell down slightly closer to his body. I understand. Perhaps I can meet him another time, but I would still be interested in hearing your thoughts on him for now, the Grand Duke said. Of course, I said. For starters, how did you meet him? He asked. I accidentally summoned him many years ago in training session gone wrong. This was when I was in school and hadn't yet mastered any rites or rituals. We were preparing to all summon familiars for the first time, and he was the one that I summoned, I told him. You said that he was a being of great power, did you not? So, if you don't mind me asking, how could you have accidentally summoned him? Why did he simply not use magic to stop you? He asked. Jake explained, on his world magic does not exist. Instead, they used advanced sciences and technology to accomplish their goals. And besides that, he was only an adolescent when I first summoned him. According to him, he wasn't even of marrying age at the time, I said. So, you dominated his mind and discovered these things in his memories. Then he named you, the Grand Duke asked. No, sir. Though he was young, he was far too strong for me to perform the rite of dominance on successfully. After I attempted to do so, he lashed out and destroyed one of the floors of the classroom by catching a seeking stone out of midair, and then he threw it back, completely destroying the floor, I said. I thought you said that he had no magic, he wondered. He didn't. He did, however, possess immense speed and reflexes, as well as unfathomable physical strength, I said. After seeing the destruction, I reversed the summoning and sent him home. I didn't see him again for several years, and by then we had both reached adulthood. And how did you see him again? Now the Grand Duke was leaning closer, interested by my story. On my final days at the Mage Academy that I was attending, a new student was practicing his summoning spell and accidentally summoned a Borag. He attempted to dominate the creature, but apparently he performed the spell incorrectly, and the beast went into a vicious rage. Many students fled. The teachers tried to fight it off, but, none of them were trained attack mages. I am a mage of healing. That was my focus on the academy. So I hid and tried to wait the beast out. Slowly it encroached on my position, so I made a daring escape. I then used what little time I had to summon Jake. I knew he was strong and figured that if he defeated the beast, then all I would have to do would be to reverse the summoning, and that would be that. If he failed, then he would at least buy me time to escape fully, I said. A wise strategy for one so young, and I take it your plan succeeded, he asked. Yes, in a single attack, Jake killed the beast. I immediately reversed the summoning to send him home, I said. The Grand Duke went on and asked many more questions about Jake. He asked what he was like, what happened after I sent him away, and how he agreed to become my familiar. He kept asking question after question until the baronet, whom he'd been sitting so quietly that I'd almost forgotten that he was listening, interrupted. Grand Duke, it is almost time for your next meeting with Lord de Lesquis. Ah, yes. You're right. He turned to me. Thank you, Monsieur. I hope that we can set up an appointment for me to meet your familiar Jake at a later time. I'm sure that he would be interested, I assured him. With that, I was escorted out of the room, and the baronet and Grand Duke went to go to their meeting. I passed a woman behind the desk and asked her how long I'd been talking with the Grand Duke for. About an hour and a half, she said, and I thanked her and started to fly away. And just as I did, I noticed a small group of well-decorated Nyama watch me leave, and they seemed quite angry. End of chapter. Summer's Day, Part 3. I flew out of the city hall and back into town. I was getting hungry, so I made my way over to a shop. My people were omnivorous, but we prefer fruits and insects over anything else. I was craving a magoipa, a small, sweet, watery fruit popular amongst lower-class Nyama like myself. It's affordable and quite tasty. I landed in front of a small stand that sold them, as well as several other kinds of affordable fruits. Hello, young one. The elder around the shop greeted me. Would you care to see the list of our goods today? Well, I only came to purchase a magoipa, but if you have anything else it sounds good, then why not? I said. Excellent. The elder said and used magic to create a shimmering image above my head. They were pictures of everything that he sold. As you could see, we have some koya seeds, if that takes your interest, as well as some magoipa seeds, like you mentioned. and even a supply of Nula fruits from Fematuk, a small island north of Famu, the elder explained. After looking over his supply, I requested 2 Mykoipo seeds and 1 Nula fruit seed. He carefully used magic to pull out seeds from an assortment of bags behind his stand and move them into a small cloth pouch for me. I paid him in magical power and flew over to a small clearing nearby. Several others were doing the same as me, preparing to eat. I placed my seeds on the ground and pushed some magic into them. Quickly, they grew roots and planted themselves firmly in the dirt. Then a stalk grew up and blossomed. Within a minute, the blossom was growing my fruits. I like my Mykoipa a bit firm, so I stopped before it was fully ripe. The Nula was unique. Its flavor was bold and citric, but had a sweet aftertaste. It also wasn't as watery as I'd imagined that it would be, so I probably won't get it again, but it was still good. I finished my meal and started to fly away, but just as I spread my wings, someone from behind me shouted, "You peasant!" It startled me, and I looked around to see what was happening, only to discover several well-decorated nobles, the ones that I'd seen at the city hall, were glaring at me. No one was around, so I said, "Are you talking to me?" The 3 of them landed in front of me and puffed up to see bigger, an act nobles do when conversing with lower citizens to seem better. They were all taller than me and decorated with gold lace, but only the one in the middle, the shortest, was also adorned with any jewels. He had 2 green gems around his neck and a blue one in the center of each wing.
"Yeah, of course we are talking to you. You are a Nyama who was named by her familiar,"
the one in the middle demanded angrily.
Yes, I am Suma," I said quietly. "Shameful. I didn't think that peasants could fall any lower. You stole an honor reserved for nobility. It's disrespectful enough that commoners are even allowed to have names. But now they abuse the privilege by practicing naming themselves," the middle one said.
"Sir, I assure you, you are mistaken. I didn't," I tried to say, but was cut off.
"You dare speak to a noble? First you steal a name, now you interrupt me. Worst of all, you claim that I am lying."
The noble screamed and raised his wings. A ball of magic energy formed between them, and he threw it at me. It caught me square in the chest and broke several of my ribs.
You will go to the Grand Duke and renounce your name, you filthy commoner, and maybe we will spare your life,"
the noble said proudly. I cast a spell of healing on my chest, just enough so that I could quickly fly away. I used magic to increase my speed as I flew. Over my shoulder, I heard one of the nobles scream to follow me. I couldn't think. The pain in my shoulder shot through me and slowed me down. They were gaining on me.
"Jake,
I don't know what you're doing, but get ready to look as scary as possible." I shouted through the pain and turned into an alley to try to hide. I summoned Jake as quickly as I could. "I summon you, Sentinel!" "Oh, loud!" Jake said, and began to appear just as the 3 nobles turned the corner of the alley, each with the bestial familiars. End of chapter. Part 17.
Loud!"
I said as I began to disappear. I had no time to think. The next thing I knew, I was standing in the middle of an alleyway, and Suma was standing or hiding behind me. To make matters worse, we were cornered by 3 larger colored nymphs and the very angry-looking beast familiars. "What's going on?" I asked, before feeling a sharp pain in my side, as if I'd broken a rib or something. Son of a bitch! What the crap?" I yelped. "Suma, are you okay?" I asked almost instinctually. I don't know how I knew, but I could tell that the pain that I was feeling wasn't mine, but hers.
"I'm fine,"
she said, her voice filled with pain.
"Stupid commoner, you think your familiar will help? If a lowly piece of trash like you could summon it, then it can't possibly be strong enough to make a difference," the shortest and most decorated of the 3 nymphs said. I ignored him and asked her a question. "Was it one of them?"
that did this to you?"
"Yes,"
she said between pained breaths. I felt a deep, burning rage welling up inside me, but calmed it long enough to think straight. "What are these world's laws regarding this?" I asked with gritted teeth.
"It's illegal. Nobles can't,"
she started to say.
"Shut up and stop ignoring me, you stupid corner. Nobles are higher birth, such as myself can do as we please,"
he said. I can't read the facial expressions of Suma's people very well yet, but I know a blowhard when I hear one. His voice dripped with entitlement, and he and his 2 goons were perched atop their beast familiars, sitting on them some kind of horned saddle. The familiars that they were looked very strange. The middle nymph rode on some kind of hyena creature with a dark blue fur and a bobbed tail. The one to my right, the tallest, rode in some kind of reddish-orange lizard thing that resembled a salamander. The one on my left rode a small dog-sized feline with thick white and grey fur, a tusk protrusions on its face. "If I defend us, will I break some kind of law that'll get you in trouble?" I asked, looking back at Suma. I wanted to make them pay, but not if it would hurt Suma afterwards.
I don't know,"
Suma tried to say. "You stupid familiar, don't turn your back on me!" the noisy nymph shouted, and I felt something hit my back. Waves of pain shot through my body. I became nauseous and felt like I suddenly developed a fever. I fell to my knees and threw up. The nymph laughed. "That's what you get for—" My fist colliding with his body stopped his boasting and flung his body against the wall. He hit it with a crack and fell to the floor with a small thud. It sounded like a cracking egg, then dropping a chicken egg onto the concrete. Immediately the hyena creature lunged at me, but I had already started summoning destiny. So instead of biting me, it got a mouthful of the tip of my spear and was impaled. The other 2 gasped and their familiars backed up. "That hurt!" I said, enraged and screaming. The noble I hit didn't respond. In fact, he didn't move. I slowly, and with great difficulty, stood up and used my shoe to pin down half of the familiar that wasn't on the spear so that I could put it free. The creature's green blood oozed off my spear in a thick, goopy mess. The feathers on the remaining 2 nymphs were puffed up, making them seem as if they had doubled in size. Suma quickly flew over to the noble that I'd hit with the casting healing magic on him. Slowly, he started to groan and move again. "Is he alive?" I asked, trying to remain calm and not let my concern over having just knocked a noble out show my voice.
"He's alive. Really,"
Suma said, her tone a mixture of annoyance and pain. The 2 other nymphs hadn't moved, but upon hearing that their friend was alive, their feathers just settled slightly. I couldn't think clearly. I was still in a ton of pain, so I could do is turn to the other nymphs and demand that they leave.
"Jake, I need help,"
Suma said. I turned to help her just as the other nymphs flew away and their familiars vanished. "How can I help?" I asked, leaning beside him. "You hit him hard. He has internal bleeding and broken bones all over his body. I could heal him, but I'm running out of magic. I already healed myself earlier, summoned you, used magic to eat and to enhance my speed in an attempt to get away, as well as a few other things. Starting to run low," Suma said. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Remember how I tried to take some of your life force and got knocked on my tail feathers? We're going to try that again," she said, and stopped healing him to face me. "Do it, but be careful," I said. A magic circle formed around the 2 of us. Suma began to glow a violet aura and turned back to the nymph. This time, when she started healing him, instead of a glow from her hands, a much darker blue and almost black glow emitted.
"Are you okay, Suma?" "I'm fine. I didn't take a percentage. Instead, I'm letting your magic flow through me. This was the only way that I could use as much as I can handle," Suma said.
Suddenly, the nymph began screaming out in pain. "Ah!" He cried out and thrashed around as if he was being set on fire.
"What's going on?" I asked. I don't know,"
Suma shouted, confused. She stopped the healing spell, and her aura, as well as the healing glow, disappeared just after the magic circle vanished. The nymph continued to scream and shout in pain for several minutes, despite Suma's efforts to heal him time and time again. Whenever she would start the spells again and try to heal him, the screaming would resume after he calmed down. Soon, the screaming attracted the attention of several other nymphs claiming to be town guards. All of them rode borak beasts.
"Step away from him,"
one of them demanded upon returning to the corner and witnessing the scene.
"This man needs a healer. I've been trying, but it isn't responding," she pleaded. "Step away now," one of the other guards yelled.
"I can't. He'll die," Suma said. I knew this wasn't going to end well, so I scooped Suma up in my hands and held onto her as she screamed, "Let me go, Jake! Let me go!" One of the guards went over to the nymph and examined him, lifted his wing, and then cast some kind of spell, before turning back to the other guards and saying that he was dead. End of chapter. Jake's interrogation. Suma and I were placed under arrest and restrained with magic. But she was. I was collared and led by a chain attached to one of the gods' boraks. Suma was taken in to be interrogated in a separate room than I was. Actually, first I think they planned to take me to a kennel, but once they realized that I could talk, they took me to a holding room of sorts. It was made of thick and tightly woven vines, and they used magic to separate them so that we could enter and leave. After about an hour of waiting, several nymphs came in and one introduced himself as Investigator DeHull, while another began quietly casting a spell in the corner of the room. A magic circle formed around me, and I asked, what's going on?
"We are going to search through your memories and watch the event from your perspective. We are doing the same for Lady Suma as well. Don't be alarmed, it won't hurt,"
DeHull explained.
"We start by asking questions, and she will watch and experience your memories as you recall them."
"Okay, but what about her?" I asked, pointing at the other nymph to my left who was looking over the wooden tablet that she had brought with her. "What is she doing?"
"She will be monitoring your psyche while we ask the questions, to monitor your mental state for your safety and mental well-being," DeHull said.
"I thought you said this wasn't going to hurt," I asked cautiously.
"Normally, that's true, but I'm just a safety measure, I guess you could say. We have never performed this procedure on your species before, so we want to be careful,"
the nymph with the tablet interjected.
"Exactly," DeHull confirmed. "So, Mr. Sentinel, are you ready to begin?"
Him calling me Sentinel caught me a bit off guard, but I answered him nonetheless. Yes." The nymph laid down the tablet, and the second larger magic circle formed around the first one.
"What's the first thing you remember before being summoned?" DeHull asked.
"I was at home, then Suma, she communicated with me. She said to prepare to be summoned and to look scary. It was very loud, and she sounded scared." DeHull looked between the two nymphs, both nodded their heads, and he continued the questions.
"What was the first thing you saw after being summoned?"
"Three nymphs, Nyama, with your beast familiars, and Suma. She was hurt, badly," I said.
"Could you describe this Nyama?"
"They were decorated with gold, and the one who attacked me, had jewels. They were dark-colored and arrogant," I told him.
"And what about their familiars?"
"One looked like a lizard, one like a cat, and another like a hyena or a dog." With that, DeHull looked over to the two nymphs that they exchanged looks. They were probably not familiar with the animals I likened to the familiars to, but he didn't press the issue further.
"So after you arrived, what happened?"
"I checked on Suma. She was hurt. One of the Nyama started screaming and then attacked me. I remember the pain I felt. That magic attack hit me in the back. I remember the nausea and the fevered feeling. For a moment, it was like I was happening all over again. As I thought about it, the nymph who was monitoring my mental state looked pained and cried out before falling to the floor. The larger magic circle vanished." DeHull fluttered over to her and checked on her.
"Are you okay?"
he asked urgently.
"I'm fine. It just felt like I could feel his pain, like it was happening to me," she said.
"I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen," I said to the nymph.
"We didn't realize that you were still in any pain, Mr. Sentinel. We can have a healer brought to you at once," DeHull offered.
"No, I'm fine. I'm not in any pain. I was just remembering how bad the attack from the noble hurt," I explained. DeHull seemed worried, but took my word for it and resumed as soon as the nymph was ready to recast the spell. "After you were attacked, you struck the noble." "Yes, I hit him, but I didn't think that it was as hard as it turned out to be. I mean, he went flying, but I didn't think it would be hard enough to kill him," I said.
"And what happened after you hit him?"
"Suma rushed over and tried to heal him. Also, his familiar tried to attack me as well. I summoned destiny, that's my weapon, and it impaled itself, I said. Once again, DeHull looked over to the two nymphs for their reaction. The one monitoring my mental state stayed quiet. The one monitoring my memories looked disturbed.
Are you okay, Memory Seeker?
I'm fine, she responded. It's just, gruesome.
Turning back to me, DeHull asked, when Suma tried to heal the noble, what happened?
She went over to him, and a glowing golden light started emitting from her. She kept it up for a while, but she said she was running out of magic because she had used a lot that day. I told him.
You said the Lady Suma's magic was golden, but our guards' reports say there is blue and black. Why the disparity?
DeHull questioned more intensely. When she said that she was running out of magic, she started to draw on mine. She started glowing purplish, and a spell that changed color as well, I remembered. The two other nymphs confirmed that I was telling the truth.
One final question. Do you believe Suma was actually healing the noble who attacked her? She had every reason to want him dead. Is there any doubt in your mind that maybe it wasn't a healing spell?
DeHull asked. I admit, the question had crossed my mind, but I had already settled those thoughts by the time I got to the interrogation room. No, Suma tried her best to save him, I declared. The three exchanged looks and released the spell.
Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Sentinel. If everything checks out, and you should be released by the end of the day. If you need anything, knock on the door and the guards will try and help you, but please do not attempt to leave before you are dismissed,
DeHull stated before leaving with the other two. I sat in the room for a while. At one point I tried to contact Suma, but she was in the middle of an interrogation of her own, so we couldn't talk. 2 hours passed before DeHull came back into the room.
Okay, Mr. Sentinel, your memories have been evaluated and verified. You had no intent to kill the nobleman, who has been identified as the youngest of Magistrate Kakal, and the killing has been ruled an accidental death from self-defense. For now, lead investigator Mankin has elected not to press charges, but you should expect further questions in the future. When nobles get involved, things like this get drug out. But for now, you're free to go.
Thank you, I said, and DeHull led me outside where I saw Suma. I walked over to her, and she immediately flew over to my shoulder and rested her head against mine. Here is something you should know. Nyama can't cry. Not like humans. They sing when they are sad. It sounds like morning bird songs, a tweeting, whistling noise. And as soon as she landed, she began to sing. End of chapter. Suma's interrogation. Jake held on to me. I screamed and begged and ordered him to let me go, to let me keep healing the noble. But he never listened. Eventually the guards arrested Jake and I. He was collared and like a normal familiar, and I was restrained with magic. Then we were taken to be questioned at a nearby guard station. I waited for a long time before anyone came in, and the first time they did it was to ask about Jake. I sat alone in that room with nothing but my thoughts. I thought about the noble, about what he did to me, about how I couldn't save him. I wondered if I even tried. In the moment, it felt like I was trying, but I failed. I asked myself if I'd done something different, would it have worked? If I'd been able to channel more of Jake's magic, could I have healed him? Questions plagued my mind, danced in my head like a snow in a blizzard. But no matter what thoughts came out or went in, there was only a single end to it. I didn't save him. A little while later, an investigator by the name of DeHull came to question me. With him was a memory seeker whose job was to watch my memories as I was being questioned. Your familiar, Sentinel, already let us do a memory delve on him. We ask that you cooperate as well, DeHull said. Yes, I said softly. The memory seeker stood beside me and cast a spell, and DeHull began asking his questions. Can you tell us how and when you first met the nobles from the alley? I was in the meeting with the Grand Duke at the hall. He wanted to speak to me about my name and my familiar. After I left the meeting, I saw the nobles watching me. They must have followed me from City Hall because they found me after I had just finished eating. One of them called out to me. He started screaming at me and insulting me. He demanded that I go back to the Grand Duke and renounce my name, I explained. Do you know why he would choose you specifically? DeHull asked. What I mean is, there are many commoners that have names. Why did he go after you?
He said that I didn't deserve it. He said that I practically named myself, and that meant that I'd stolen the honor that belonged to nobles, I told him.
Why did he say that you had named yourself? Dahal asked suspiciously.
Jake. He named me before he became my familiar, I said. I didn't order it or anything. I hadn't even asked him to be my familiar. He just decided to name me.
I explained. In our world, ordering someone to give you a name is a crime. Technically, it's called the theft of honor. Dahal looked over at the memory seeker and she nodded.
So,
what happened after that? Dahal asked.
The nobles attacked me. One of them threw a magic attack at me, and it broke a few of my ribs. I used some of my healing magic and flew away as fast as I could, I said.
But they chased you? Dahal questioned.
Yes. They all the way to the alley. In a panic, I summoned my familiar, Jake, I said.
You've called him Jake twice now, but according to our record, your familiar's name is Sentinel. Dahal interrupted me.
Yes. Sorry. When he became my familiar, I had to choose a name for him, but his name is from his world as Jake.
You used a naming bond for a familiar summoning. That's rather uncommon. Normally, naming bonds are only for important things like magical items. Why use it with a familiar? He wondered.
That's harder to explain. I didn't actually mean to do it.
When I was performing the ritual, I was forced to choose a name, I said, hoping that they didn't ask further questions about that. In truth, I had never seen a familiar bonding ritual like the kind I participated in. I still hadn't figured out what the voice was. I glanced over at the memory seeker, who at that moment looked like some mix of confused and terrified. Dahal noticed this too, but didn't say anything. They simply exchanged looks, and I wondered if they were employing some kind of thought communication spell so that they didn't need to speak in front of me. Well, anyway, you said they followed you into the alley and that you summoned your familiar. After he arrived, what happened? Dahal asked.
After Jake appeared, he asked if I was okay, and if we would get into trouble if he defended us. The noble, he attacked us, hit him with what I think was a spell meant to attack life forces. Jake didn't have any physical injuries, but he became ill immediately. Jake hit the noble and
I tried to speak, but I became too overwhelmed. I was on the verge of breaking down. I was breathing quickly. My heart rate was up. My stomach was upset.
I'm sorry. Can I have a minute?
Of course, sir. We can take a break for a few minutes. Do you need anything? Water? Food? Dahal asked, and the memory seeker stopped her spell.
No, thank you. I just need to clear my head for a moment.
Dahal and the seeker left the room for a few minutes, and I pulled myself together. I couldn't stop picturing in my head that noble screaming as I healed him. I broke down, crying for a while, until I was able to get myself together. A while after I finished, Dahal and the memory seeker came back in and resumed the questioning after making sure that I was all right. Your familiar hit the noble after the noble attacked him. What happened after that? Dahal said, fluttering back onto his perch.
I ran over to him and I tried to heal him with magic. I trained in healing and bonding magic at school, but I was running out of energy. I asked Jake for help, and I channeled his energy through me and used it to try and heal the noble. I don't know what happened. I performed that spell hundreds of times. It always works, but he just started screaming, I said.
I was tempted to look over at the memory seeker, but I didn't. I could guess her reaction. You say you used healing magic, but according to our autopsy, only minimal healing was performed on the noble. In fact, there is evidence of torture magic being cast on him. Every bone in his body has microfractures. His muscles were shredded, and he had a total body bruise, as if every vessel inside of his skin had ruptured. I don't know how strong your familiar is, but I find it hard to believe that a single hit from him could do that kind of damage. So why don't you explain to me how he got those injuries? Dahal snapped.
No, I stammered out. I used healing magic. I couldn't do something like that.
Here's what I think, Dahal said. I think the noble attacked you, you attack your familiar, and you get mad. Then your familiar retaliates and leaves you at the perfect opportunity for revenge.
No, I didn't. I wouldn't. I just keep looking at my memories. You'll see,
I tried to say, but he cut me off. Memory magic has been around for quite some time, Miss Suma. You could have altered your memory to make it seem like you were innocent. The Hull cast a spell opening an entrance to the room, and the memory seeker entered a spell. Verify the status of your memories, then make a decision. For your sake, I hope that you're telling the truth, the Hull said as they flew out the room. Hours passed before the Hull came back. He told me that my memories had been proven genuine and that the lead interrogator of the case has decided not to press charges. I was led out of the room and was told to wait for my familiar. A few moments later, I saw him walking down the hallway. All the emotions and stress that I had been mulling over in that room came to a head, and I felt an overwhelming need to go to him. I flew over and let everything out. Jake may have been the one to hit the noble, but I was the one to fail him. In my eyes, his death was my fault. In my eyes, I killed him. End of chapter. Aftermath. After the events in the alley, I decided to stay in Suma's world for a while. I didn't feel right leaving her alone after that. I was worried about her, and in truth, I didn't want to be alone either. I couldn't stay at Suma's house. She lived halfway up a mountain, but there was a lodging in town that was usable. It was meant for familiars, but the staff were helpful and used magic to make it semi-livable so that I could stay in it for a few days. Suma was having a hard time with everything. She blamed herself for the noble's death, even though I was the one who did it. I was holding together. Honestly, I didn't know how to feel. I broke down a few times, but never in front of her. After a few days, and after getting word from the guards that the other two nobles had been in the alley had been arrested and stripped of their noble ranks, I went home for a while. I reappeared back in my apartment, my groceries still on the couch, waiting to be put away. I just stood there for a moment, in silence, waiting for something to happen. For some unknown pin to drop and signal some terrible event. But despite my feelings, I knew that that wasn't going to happen. I put my groceries away and sat on my couch. I'd been through a lot. I was attacked. I killed a man, even if it was in self-defense, and I'd been interrogated by the police. I'm not a genius, but even I know that I was messed up. I needed someone to talk to about this. It couldn't be Suma. She was already dealing with enough. I decided to talk to a therapist. Obviously, I couldn't tell her everything, or I'll be institutionalized for insanity and delusions. However, if I keep this all bottled up inside, I might actually go insane, showing that I'm not ready. Fantasy birdlands and all. I searched the internet for nearby therapists and psychiatrists that deal with this type of issue, then prayed that I wasn't put on a watch list for my searches. Finally, I found one, and luckily she had an opening for tomorrow. I called my office and took a few days off, then scheduled an appointment. I didn't sleep much that night. I tossed and turned, thinking about what had happened. I did fall asleep, but woke up every few hours. After about 4 attempts, I decided to stay awake. I looked over at the clock, and it said 6 a.m. My appointment was at 10:45 a.m. Eventually, I left for the appointment 45 minutes early, even though it was a 15-minute drive at most. I simply couldn't take waiting from my apartment any longer.
"Hello, welcome to Maxwell Private Therapy. Do you have an appointment?"
the secretary asked as I walked through the double doors of the building. "Yes, I have an appointment for Jake Vandal," I said. She turned on her computer and typed something.
"Ah, yes, 10:45 for Dr. Maxwell. You'll like her. She is very popular. She's with another patient right now. She'll be done soon, though. Please take a seat," she said as she motioned to the waiting area with seats and a table filled with magazines. I waited for a while, but was eventually called to see Dr. Maxwell. I was in the hall to the door with a plaque, then made her name on it. "Right inside,"
the secretary said, and went back to her desk. I knocked on the door and heard her call me in. End of chapter. Chapter 21. Suma's Pain. I reversed the summoning spell and sent Jake back to his home. He'd been staying in my world for a few days. He didn't feel that it was right to leave after what happened. He had stayed in a kennel for the sick and injured familiars, renovating it temporarily so that it would be comfortable. Actually, he convinced the owners of the kennel by paying with his own manor, an arrangement the owners were very happy to agree to. He stayed for about 3 days, and the owners said that if he needed another place to stay again, that they would be happy to help. I flew home after sending Jake back and prepared to go to sleep. I've been so tired lately. Ever since it happened, I felt absolutely exhausted. I arrived at my home and used magic to open the entrance. I expected it to be dark, but all the lights were still on. Normally, the light breaks in the last an hour or 3, but it had been at least 5 hours since I'd last been home. Jake insisted on me coming over so that he could be sure that I was all right and had eaten. I heard a clamor in the back of my home just as I closed the entrance. "Oh, sweetie," a voice called from my sleeping area. My heart started pounding and my chest tightened as I shouted, "Who's there?" For a moment, I thought perhaps it was more nobles come to take some kind of revenge. "Baby, it's me," the voice called out as my mother poked her head out from inside the canvased-off bed. My body relaxed, but my heart rate was still high. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I questioned. "Me too," another voice called from inside the room. "Dad?" I asked, confused, recognizing his voice. I couldn't see myself, but I could feel my feathers standing on end, so I relaxed them and myself before asking them why they were here. "Why are you here?" "Honey, you were attacked. Why wouldn't we be here?" My mom stated. "Well, yeah, but that was days ago, almost a week. Why now and not then?" I wondered, a bit hot under the collar. Honestly, it had been on my mind a lot since that happened. I live only 3-minute flight from my parents, but they hadn't been to see me. I know, and, we're sorry, but, my mom started, but she was fumbling over her words and beginning to trail off. So my dad interrupted her. "Honey, that familiar of yours here, he scares us. He's dangerous. You're a rank 5 healing mage. You have no business utilizing a familiar that strong. He's dangerous, and it's his fault that you were attacked," my dad said to my disbelief. "Jake didn't get me attacked. He saved my life. He named me," I shouted. "You remember that, Suma? Don't think I haven't noticed you never use it." Dad scoffed. "Right, Suma. What kind of name even is that? Probably means pet in his world." "Enough, the both of you," Mom interjected just before I could reply to my father. "Look, Suma, we were just worried that you're familiar of yours." "Jake," I interrupted. "Right, Jake. We just think that Jake may not truly have your best interest at heart. He is so strong, you can practically feel the mana radiating off of him. That's why we think maybe he doesn't understand that you just, well, not to say, look, what I'm trying to say is, I cut her off. You're saying that I'm weak and that I can't take care of myself." No, we aren't saying that at all," my mom started, but my dad cut her off. "That is exactly what we're saying. You're a rank 5 mage, the lowest of the medium ranks, and you're a healer, not even a combat class. You should get rid of that troublemaking monkey and get a familiar that you can actually handle, like a Zentorix hound or a— Get out! Get out right now!" I screamed and forced the entrance open. "I won't listen to this anymore. This argument is over the army all over again. Just get out!" "Honey, please, don't," my mom tried to say. "Go!" I yelled. My parents weren't listening type, not when it came to me. Dad wrapped a wing around my arm and led her outside as she cried. I closed the entrance and just fumed for a few seconds. I flew over to my bed and just tried to calm myself down. I knew they had no right to talk about Jake, but they had no right to ridicule me. But they always have. I spent several minutes angry, but once that was gone, all that was left was sadness and a very large, very empty home. End of chapter. Chapter 22. I walked out of the therapist's office after my first session and sat in my car. She had listened to me talk about the attack, how I'd fought back and ended up killing one of my attackers, how Suma had tried to help him and blamed herself for failing to save him, and how we were interrogated. She didn't judge me. She just listened and occasionally asked a question. I told her how I felt about it, that I regretted killing him and not saving Sua or myself. She explained that what I was feeling was very common in people who survived assaults and ended up killing their attackers. She asked me why Suma blamed herself, and I explained that she was a kind of combat medic, or that she would be one once she moved to active duty. I then told her that I was going into the army with Suma. As I sat in my car, I thought about the last thing she said to me while I was walking out the door. I would like to have a conversation with the Suma woman. I'll ask if she's available, but she might not be interested. I replied to her before heading to my car. Now I sat thinking about what to do next. If Suma meets her, she'll have to actively meet her, but Suma's people might not have therapists. This could be good for her, and even if she agreed, Suma can't come to my world. I don't think so anyway. So I would have to bring her to Suma's world. I don't even know how that's possible. Sure, I've taken small things like clothes and pencils and random junk that I have in my hand or my pockets at the time, but the old person is a different story. I drove home and went inside. Hey, Sua, I said, trying to contact her. A moment of silence passed by, and she replied, Yes, Jake. Can you summon me? I asked. There was no reply, but my body began to disappear, and soon I was standing in a small cave, barely taller than I was, illuminated by small birds molded into the walls and ceiling. Where is this? I asked. This is my home, she said. The one up in the mountain? I asked, surprised. Yes, she said. Cool place. Anyway, I just wanted to talk to you about something, I said, looking around the cave, trying to get a feel for it. Suma, have you ever heard of a therapist? No, I don't believe I have. What is it, some kind of weapon or spell? She said. No, it's a job. It's a person who helps people process tragedy or loss, among other things. I've been talking to one about what happened in the alley, I explained. Suma seemed caught off guard. I didn't realize you, I just assumed, you seemed unbothered by everything. You never showed that it... Oh, trust me, it bothered me. It still am, but talking with the therapist helps. Or at least I feel that it is helping. I've only had a single session, but I feel like a huge weight has been lifted while I was talking. I talked to her. I'm glad that you've been able to do that. If you need some time off to go to more sessions, then that's fine. Just let me know when you want to resume training, if you even want to, she started saying, but I cut her off. Stop. I'm not going anywhere, Suma. I just brought this up because she wants to talk to you. And honestly, I'm worried about you. I think you should do it, I explained. But I thought you said magic didn't exist in your world. Would it come as a shock to her to suddenly be brought here? She pointed out. Well, yes, I admitted. But I'm more worried about your mental health than I am about the consequences of my actions at the moment. I chuckled slightly. I don't know, Suma said hesitantly. Just, think about it, okay? I suggested. Okay, I'll think about it, she relented. Good. Now for the other reason I wanted to come, my sword and shield, I said happily. Oh, right. In all the confusion, I almost forgot. Our order is probably ready, Suma said, realizing that it had probably been done for a day or two. Suma walked over to the far side of the cave and used magic to open the wall. Okay, let's go, she said and flew into the air. I walked over to the edge of the cave and looked out of the new hole and down the several 100-foot drop of the sheer cliff. Nope, I said, and brought my head back in, then laid flat on my back on the ground of the cave due to the sudden feeling of dizziness. What's wrong? Suma asked, then very quickly realized and said, Oh, right, the mountain. Okay, just hang on for a moment. She then closed the cave and told me over the psychic connection that she would just fly to the metalworker's shop and summon me straight there. Good idea, I acknowledged. Wait, does that mean that you could have just summoned me from place to place the whole time? I've been walking 15 miles for the past month. Sorry, it didn't occur to me until a few days ago. Suma apologized. It's fine. Need the exercise anyway, I said. A few minutes passed, which I spent looking around Suma's home, before she told me that she had arrived at the summon bee beside her. That was fast, I said, surprised. Flying is much faster than walking, she said, and perched on my shoulder. We walked inside, and the elderly Nyama greeted us. Ah, there you are. I was beginning to think that you had forgotten. I have your order all finished up and ready to go," he said, and flew behind his counter. Would you mind giving a poor old man a bit of a help, sir?" he asked, gesturing to the large metal objects. "No problem," I said, and picked up the finished sword and shield. It was a double-edged short sword, no longer than the total length of my arm, based on the medieval broadsword design. The shield was rectangular and only just a bit wider than my torso. It was twice as long. I wanted something small and nimble that I could maneuver easily and wield with only one hand each. "How does it feel?" "It feels pretty good," I said, giving the sword a few good swings. "And what about the metal wall?" the elder nymph asked. "The shield. I would have to test it, but it seems sturdy," I said, looking it over. "I have never constructed such odd tools, but if you ever need my services again, please do not hesitate to ask." The elder sounded joyful. I guess he had fun making my stuff. I told him that we would probably be placing a few more orders, but that it might be a while. Sumo was surprised to hear that, but we waited until he had left the metalworker's shop to ask me about it. "Jake," she started, "what do you mean by more orders? Do you need more weapons?" "No, actually. What happened in the alley made me think about something else. When that noble threw the ball of magic at me, I couldn't have moved the shield to place fast enough to block it. What I need to do is have something that is always blocking attacks. I need some armor." End of chapter.
"Jake," she started, "what do you mean by more orders? Do you need more weapons?"
"No, actually, what happened in the alley made me think about something else. When that noble threw that ball of magic at me, I couldn't have moved a shield into place fast enough to block it. What I need to do is having something that is always blocking attacks. I need some armor."
"What is armor?"
Simo wondered. I thought for a moment about how to describe it. "It's, like a shield that you can wear."
"Oh,"
Simo champed.
"Like your clothes. Are they a kind of armor? I don't think that would be enough. It didn't do much against the nobleman's attack after all."
"No, clothes aren't a kind of armor. At least not against anything more dangerous than sunburn. Good armor is usually some kind of metal affixed to leather or a durable cloth." I thought for a moment, wondering how normal metal would fare against magic. Then said, "But in all honesty, I don't know if just metal would protect against magical attacks. What do your people use for stuff like that?"
"Well, I guess we embed it with runes, or if you want something higher quality, we could have magic channels engraved into it. But that's difficult to maintain and expensive. Some Niama store their mana up for years to afford that, and it's usually only done for nobles who have the ability and time to maintain the equipment." Sua told me as she waddled her head back and forth as she thought. I began, feeling a bit confused. "I recognize what runes are, sort of. What are magic channels?" "Have you ever heard of ley lines?" Sue asked.
"Kind of. I'm semi-familiar with them," I said hesitantly.
"Magic channels are basically artificial ley lines carved into non-living objects. It allows one to run their own magic through their weapons or equipment. Normally, it is used to reinforce structures against magical attacks, but I guess it could be used for armor," she explained.
"Okay, so people put these channels into walls and stuff, then run magic into it to protect a building?" I asked.
"Exactly," she said.
"And how is that different from a rune?" "From what I know about them, they are basically the same thing," I questioned.
"Well, runes operate in a similar way, yes, but the main difference is customizability. Runes can be set into something, then all you have to do is run mana through it and get the desired effect will occur. But magic channels can be influenced to meet the circumstances. Imagine you have a house with runes engraved into the walls to repel fire. That's going to be useful if someone tries to burn it down. Useless if they launch a water-based attack. But with magic channels, all you have to do is manipulate your mana that you are running through them, and it can take on the desired effect."
"Okay, that makes more sense. Sounds like magic channels are a lot better then," I concluded.
"Well, yes and no. While they are more versatile, they are difficult to maintain and require several mages working in almost perfect unison to utilize. Runes are also cheaper and easy to replace if they get damaged," she said.
"How would they get damaged?" I asked.
"Well, they are basically just scratches filled with mana-infused clay or dyes. They could get hit or a stray magic bolt or even just accidentally wiped off."
"Pretty fragile then," I said.
"They can be.
But really it depends on the skill and power of its creator. A skilled rune maker would produce higher quality and more durable runes. But, of course, they would charge more as well, she said. Yeah, that makes sense, I said. So where could we find a rune maker? I asked. I don't know, Suma said. You don't know, but you live here, I asked. Jake, do you live in a city? She asked. Yes. Tell me where every woodcarver in your city is, she said. All right, good point, I realized. Any ideas on how to find out? I asked. I don't know. Maybe we could go ask the Grand Duke. A noble like him is bound to know a skilled rune maker, and he was wanting to meet you anyway. She said that last part excitedly. Okay, sounds good, but, who is the Grand Duke? I wondered. End of chapter. Chapter 24. Suma explained to me what and who the Grand Duke was. Basically, he was like the Prime Minister or a Supreme Court judge. She told me that she had met him a few days ago, the day of the attack, at the time that I was at work. So that's what you wanted, I realized. The Grand Duke guy wanted to talk to me. Yes, Suma answered. He finds you interesting and wanted to meet you in person. You don't think that he'd have anything to do with those nobles attacking you, do you? I wondered aloud. I doubt it. The Grand Duke was elected on a platform of holding nobles accountable for their transgressions. In truth, he's not a popular figure in the noble society. He has personally brought over 10 high-ranking nobles to justice and spearheaded reforms in laws that gave more power to commoners and other non-nobles, Suma explained. Isn't he a noble? I asked. Well, yes, but technically no. He is from a noble family, but in order to become a Grand Duke, you have to give up any right to nobility so that you can't be swayed by the promise of increasing your own riches. Imagine if a lord of a profitable area became a Grand Duke. He could just then create laws that benefited him and weakened his opponents, she said. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I nodded, that I understood. So, how do we get an appointment? I guess we go to the Royal Citadel and make an appointment. Or maybe we'll get lucky and he'll be available when we get there, she guessed. Okay, how far is it from here? For me, not far. For you, very far, she said, half joking, half being serious. Okay, you fly there and I'll just wait here, I guess, I suggested. Okay, see you in a bit, she said and flew away. I looked around and then down at my sword and shield that I was still holding. What am I going to name you? I wondered to myself quietly. I sat on the ground and looked closely at the sword, admiring its craftsmanship and its fine edge. Excalibur, maybe. A bit on the nose. I pulled out my phone. It hadn't occurred to me to try and use it while in this world, mostly because I'd assumed that it wouldn't work. No bars. I said, seeing my utter lack of service. Too bad, that could have been pretty useful. I put my phone back away and picked up the shield with my other hand, being sure to lay the sword down carefully so as to not scratch it. What about you? Maybe something simple and easy to remember, just like shield or wall. I decided to look up a few famous weapons from history when I got back home. Hey, Suma, I said, trying to contact her. Almost there, Jake. Not long now, she answered. Well, that's good. But not that I was wondering. I was trying to decide names for our new weapons. Any ideas from your country's history? I asked. Well, there are a few things that come to mind for your shield, but nothing for the sword, I'm afraid. My world is nothing like it, she said. What names do you have for the shield? Well, there is a story from our mythology about a man who used a magic to create an impenetrable walls of energy to protect his forces. His name was Azon of the Barrier, and the rite he used was later named in his honor, Azon's Wall. Azon? Not bad, I acknowledged, interesting in the name. What else? There was said to be a fortress that stood against a siege for a solid 2 years before it finally fell. It was called Fort Montauk, she suggested. By the way, I'm here. Ready to go? I picked up the sword and shield. Ready. She summoned me, and I reappeared standing in front of a large triangular castle of sorts, with many important-looking guards and their familiars waiting at the gates. Will I be allowed there in here like this? I asked. I think so, she said hesitantly. They'll probably just assume that you are under my control. Suma perched on my shoulder, and we walked up to the guards. One of them asked the reason for our entrance. We are attempting to schedule an appointment with the Grand Duke at his request. The guard that she was talking to looked over at me. Keep this one on a tight leash, he said, and then they stepped aside to let us pass. They just let us pass. No papers, no further questions. Just a single question and an order to keep a familiar under control, I asked, amazed. The guards of the Citadel are said to be the most powerful and well-trained of all the Grand Duke's armed forces, even more so than his own personal guard. If anyone tries to do something that they don't like, they won't be alive long enough to regret it, she explained as they walked into the building. Noted, I said, looking around. It was a large, open area with a small perches dotted around certain places. It resembled a grand sanctum, the place where Suma made me her familiar. But somehow it seemed more official and less, sacred or ceremonial. We went up to the desk with a young Niama sitting behind it. She was about Suma's height, but rounder, with darker feathers and a bit less sparkly. Hi, we are here to schedule an appointment with the Grand Duke, Suma said. The Grand Duke asked us to, she added. Reason for visit, the other Niama asked with a sweet high-pitched voice. He requested to speak to me regarding my familiar. My name is Suma, Suma replied. Ah, of course. I was made aware that you might come by. The Grand Duke has made a special appointment time available for you if you're free in 3 days, the Niama told us. Will that work for you? Suma asked me. I nodded my head. I mean, you freeze time whenever you summon me, so I'm really always free, I said jokingly. I saw the other Niama's face when I started talking, but she didn't speak up or anything. She just looked very surprised. Suma looked confused for a moment. I don't freeze time when I summon you. End of chapter. Chapter 25. Of course. I was made aware that you might come by. The Grand Duke has made a special appointment time available for you if you are free in 3 days, the Niama told us. Will that work for you? Suma asked. I nodded my head. I think so. I mean, you can freeze time or whatever when you summon me, so I'm really free, always, I said jokingly. I saw the other Niama's face when I started talking, but she didn't speak up or anything. She just looked very surprised. Suma looked confused for a moment. I don't freeze time when I summon you. I was taken aback at this extremely shocked. What are you talking about? Every time you summon me and then put me back, I end up at the exact moment I left. Of course, you're freezing time. I let my words hang in the air for a moment, and the room felt unnaturally still as I waited for her answer. A wait that spanned an eternity of mere seconds. I have no idea what you're talking about, Jake. I absolutely have no way to stop time. No one does. It's impossible. Suma shifted to my shoulder uncomfortably. But I do believe you. You believe me? I asked. But you said that it was impossible. You're basically the walking definition of impossible, Jake. There is so much that we don't know about you and your abilities. Who's to say that somehow time isn't stopping when I summon you? At this point, nothing surprises me anymore, she said, shaking her head. The Niama interrupted. So I take it that you are free for a noon appointment in 3 days? Suddenly, Suma and I snapped back to what we were doing and told the Niama that we wanted the appointment. We walked out of the Royal Citadel. Well, I walked and Suma rode. Suma, I began, what do you mean when you called me impossible? You have incredible strength, a forgiving heart, impossible levels of life force, and you have the ability to produce magic from your body at the same time as you manipulate the magic in the air. If you had any control or education in it, even the slightest bit, you would be a court-level mage, Suma explained. Okay, but what did you mean when you said that there was stuff that you didn't know about me? The only thing I can think about is what happened in the Grand Sanctum, I said. You remember, right? That fire guy? Yes, I remember. And while that is one of them, perhaps even the biggest one, I didn't mean only that, Suma said. What else don't we know? I wondered. Well, there are quite a few things, really. By a being born without magic suddenly develops into a prodigy, how you are able to understand me and the rest of my kind, despite never learning the language. And of course, there are things like your magical attributes and other things that are a bit easier to find out, Suma said. Well, why don't we start out by finding out what we can? Begin with the simple stuff, you know, I suggested. I suppose you have a point, and I was going to bring it up after getting your attributes tested anyway. Suma started letting her thought trail off. With a jolt, snapped back to the start to explain. Oh, right, attributes is... I cut her off. Actually, I've read about manga and watched enough anime to know that much at least. An attribute is basically what I'll be most gifted in, I said. Yes? Exactly, Suma said. For a moment, she had a look on her face that she wanted to ask a question, but she never did. So, what are we starting with? I asked.
Finding out your attribute will be the easiest, but we will have to purchase the time slot with the equipment for the Grand Sanctum, she said. Alternatively, we could go to the city's library and try to find the materials about what we saw in the Grand Sanctum. What will they charge us for the time slot? I questioned. Most people accept coins made from rare metals, but the far more common method is to pay with mana transference, she explained. I thought back and remembered the conversation Suma and I had a week ago when she explained how her world's economy worked. So most people pay with mana, she said. How does that work? I asked. Well, most vendors and businesses have the containers to store mana, so when you pay for something, you just put the required mana into it, she said. And what do they do with it? I wondered. Sell it to the army, trade it with other vendors, or use it in crafting magical tools or equipment, she said. So I can pay for it then, if you want, Suma said. Snapping back to the present, I turned to Suma and said, All right then, let's go get my attribute tested. End of chapter. Chapter 26. All right then, let's go get my attributes tested. We started heading towards Suma's house so that I could put away my new shield and sword. Well, I say we, but really she just flew there and then summoned me and my stuff, and then she flew to the Grand Sanctum so that I could be tested. After I reappeared, I looked around the large bird cage-like room. Is this where we were last time when we came through here? No, but it does look rather similar. This is actually the opposite end of the building, Suma said from her perch nearby. So what exactly happens during this test? I wondered. I don't know, Suma said simply. It caught my attention quite quickly to hear her say that. What do you mean that you don't know? You suggested it, I said a bit worried. Yeah, I know what it is, but not how it works. I was tested as a child. I don't remember much, she explained. Will it hurt? I asked. I don't know. Will they put me to sleep? I asked more nervously. Honestly, Jake, you're a mountain of muscle and magical power. Don't be such a skiddler, Suma teased. What? A small amphibian that is known for running away from predators. Ha, I said sarcastically. So, where do we go to get me tested? I asked, looking around the room again, this time for a sign or a help desk or something. I'm not sure exactly. You go left, and I will go right. Let me know if you find anything, Suma said, and flew off. I walked around for a while before seeing a nymph perched in the center of the room. I started to walk towards him, but as soon as I did, he squawked loudly and flew away. I kept going for a bit until Suma finally contacted me saying that she found the area. Oh, good, I said. The only thing I found was I was cut off halfway through the sounds of flapping wings and shouts. Mind that creature! I can't have got him far. Who would just let their familiar roam around like that? Who could be some dangerous... Suma, please summon me now, I said, not wanting to deal with the issue. Just as I began to vanish, I heard a voice shout, There he is! I was fully gone by the time they got to me. Ready to get tested, Jake? Suma asked excitedly. Yep. I decided to forget about what just happened. We were led into a large room by a Niema with almost completely white feathers. It was the first one that I'd seen with so little blue that at first I didn't realize it was one. Looking closer, I saw the one little blue she did have was pale and cloudy. Over our mental connection, I asked Suma about it. Suma, why does this Niema have almost no blue? This is the Grand Sanctum. I don't know the specifics, but I do know some who live and work here choose to have the color of the feathers removed completely or dyed white, Suma said. Why don't you know? I asked. Because it's a religious thing and I don't attend this church, she explained. Her answer made sense. I couldn't expect her to know everything about her world. After all, there was plenty of stuff in mine that I didn't know. The room we were in was large and tall, but in the center of the room was a table of sorts with several different colored gems adorning them. The table was solid all the way through, as if it were carved from a single block of stone, and 2 feet tall. Off to the sides and the room were smaller tables. Well, they were more like tall bumps on the floor, really, but they each had several gems within it. Place your hands on the gems one by one, the Niema instructed. If the gem glows, then that is your branch, and we can proceed to the required table. Her voice was small and faint, but not timid. It was like she had never raised it in her whole life, something frail, yet elegant. I placed my hands on the first 2 gems, but the Niema clarified that she meant place both hands on a single gem. I apologized and moved my left hand over to the gem my right hand was on.
I waited for a moment, but it didn't glow, and the Nyama said that I should move on to the next one. I repeated this process for every gem on the table, until there was only a single one left. I guess that's my attribute, I said, placing my hand on the gem and turning to the Nyama. The Nyama averted her gaze as if to hide her face, and quietly said, "You have my deepest sympathies. I am so sorry." Her voice sounded like she was sad. It broke as she spoke for the second time, and I thought she was beginning to sing. However, she quickly regained her composure and apologized again. "I'm so sorry, Sir Jake." Sorry? Why?" I asked. "Jake," Suma said, sounding very upset herself, "that is the gem of chaos." "Okay. What's that mean?" I asked, confused. It was the white Nyama that answered the question. "The attributes of all living things fall under two broad categories, order and chaos. Almost everyone has some form of order magic. These common attributes include energy, body, nature, and mind. Each of these can be subdivided further. For instance, Miss Suma, what is your attribute?" "My attribute is healing," Suma said. "It falls under body type." "Exactly. However, chaos types are exceedingly rare. There have only been 4 or 5, if you believe the legends, chaos mages in recorded history. Some kinds of chaos are illegal. Anyone found practicing them are punished severely," the white Nyama concluded. "What? So you're saying that I might not even be able to use my magic?" I questioned, feeling a bit sad and angry. "It is possible," she told me. I sighed. "Well, we've come this far," I said, and laid my hand on the final gem. The dark blue, deep black glow emanated from the gem, and I heard an audible gasp from the white nymph. "So, is it the illegal type?" I asked. We don't know. That gem only tells us that it is chaos," she explained. I looked over at Suma, who had been quiet this whole time, and saw her wide-eyed and looking what she was on the verge of freaking out. She was staring off into space and breathing heavily. I placed a hand on her, and she jumped slightly in surprise, but soon leaned into my hand. She began to calm down as we followed the nymph to another smaller table. "First, place your hands on the gem closest to you," she almost ordered. She sounded quite uncertain and nervous. I did as she said, but it didn't glow. She breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed her tense body. "Okay, good. You're not the illegal attribute." "Well, what is it?" I asked, beginning to get exasperated. "Place your hands on the gem directly to the left of the one you touched," she said, more relaxed. I did, and the gem glowed a navy blue. "So, what kind is it?" End of chapter. Part 27. "Place your hands on the gem directly to your left of the one that you just touched," she said, much more relaxed. I did, and the gem glowed a navy blue. "So, what kind of magic is it?" "Inversion magic," the white nymph said. Suma let out a deep relief sigh. "Thank goodness," she said. "Is that good?" I wondered. "If you have the chaos type magic, then that's the one you want," Suma said. "I have never met an inversion magic user. It's quite a rare attribute," the nymph noted. "How rare?" I asked. "I've only ever heard of one," she said. "The first one. And until you, only creature to use inversion magic was the familiar of the legendary court mage Unsuk Baldagan." "So, what does it do?" I asked. "Inversion magic is unique in that it is the only known way for a mage to cast a spell outside their normal types. It switches all order of magic into its chaos magic counterpart, and vice versa," Suma explained, which also explains what happened the other day in the alley. "It does?" I wondered. "The chaos equivalent of the healing attribute is one of the forms of the illegal magic type that we talked about earlier. Death magic, specifically the pain attribute, also called injury magic," Suma said in a serious tone. "It also explains why the guards found evidence of torture on the noble because, Suma stopped talking and averted her gaze to the ground. "Suma, so sorry, I didn't," I tried to say, but she cut me off. "Stop, Jake. You didn't know. Neither did I. We couldn't have known." Her voice was shaky and beginning to break. "This whole time, I thought it was my fault. I'd messed up somehow, done something wrong, but it wasn't, and I didn't." Suma turned to the white nymph and bowed. Thank you so much. This has taken such a burden off my shoulders." "Please, there is no need for that, Lady Suma," the white nymph said as she tried to get Suma to straighten herself. I'm sorry to interrupt, but what exactly does this mean? Like, what do I do with the inversion magic? I asked. I mean, if I'm going to invert every type and attribute I come across, what does this mean for our combo magic? Suma looked caught off guard for a moment. You make a good point. Since my attribute is healing and yours is inversion, any combo magic would be illegal. So, we won't have access to the biggest gun in our arsenal, I said. Wait, what does that mean about my spells? Will I be allowed to do magic? I asked, a bit worried. It was the white nymph who answered the question. Oh yes, you will still be able to use magic. However, since you are a chaos magic user, you won't be able to perform any spells that use order magic, as it is your natural opposite. So, I can't use water or fire magic? I asked. Oh no, both chaos and order mages can manipulate the elements and energy. But you wouldn't be able to do is perform healing magic, or really any magic that is only possessed by order mages, like body magic and mind magic. However, energy and nature magic can be performed by both types of mages, the white nymph said. But you said earlier that there were order types, I pointed out. There are, she said, but that's just how I learned them. So can Niema, who have attributes, use both chaos and order? I asked. No. While the attributes may exist in both types, they are technically using order magic, Suma said. So does that mean I can only use spells that have to do with inversion magic? I asked. Of course not. You can use any type of chaos magic, Suma said. As long as it isn't illegal, that is, the other nymph added. Right, I said, a bit confused. They spent a few minutes explaining what types of magic I could legally use, and which were forbidden by law. Apparently, there were not nearly as many known branches of chaos magic as there are order magic, and none of the branches were illegal entirely. I have access to 5 known branches: inversion, death, nature, energy, and wild. Death was ruled illegal, and by practice of it, or its subordinate attributes, war, pain, injury, plague, and famine, is punishable by imprisonment. Wild magic is a blanket term meaning unknown and unclassified. Anything that they don't know about or haven't studied is this type. Eventually, Suma and I said goodbye to the white Niema and headed out to the training ground. We decided to walk to it. That way that we could have a conversation about what we learned and how to proceed. So, it looks like I have some studying to do, I said. You need to be careful, Jake. Researching chaos magic will undoubtedly draw a lot of unwanted attention. Nobility, royalty, and even some commoners all have their eyes on people who try and use it, Suma explained after perching on my shoulder. Why does everyone fear it so much? I get that it's rare, but this feels more like fearing the unknown, I pointed out. There may have been only one known creature to have inversion magic, but there have been several instances of chaos mages, or creatures that possess chaos magic, going on rampages and killing thousands, or even millions. Who were they? Arguably the most famous is the Death Dragon. It was a being of unimaginable power that laid waste to most of the world, nearly leading to my race's extinction, Sua said. Wait, you have dragons here? I said, amazed. No, not anymore. They all disappeared years ago. How? No one knows, she said. Some say that they were hunted to extinction after the Death Dragon's rampage. Others think they just died off naturally. They were tremendous beasts, requiring a lot of food, most of which the Death Dragon destroyed. And the others? I asked. Who were the other chaos magic users, I mean? They were beings from another world that found their way to ours. They were seemingly unstoppable and fearless warriors of incomparable power, and they called themselves Vikings. End of chapter. There were beings from another world that found their way to ours. They were seemingly unstoppable. Fearless warriors of incomparable power, they called themselves Vikings. Did you say Vikings? I half yelled. All of the things that you could have said, that was definitely not on my list of potential guesses. Suma's head pulled back quickly. Yes, she said hesitantly. Have you heard of them? She said, seemingly realized. In a manner of speaking, yes. They invaded my homeland over 1,000 years ago, although we called them the Danes and the Northmen. So their wrath has made it to your world as well. They were ruthless in my world. Was it the same for yours? She didn't have lips, but based on the tone, I could just imagine her spitting out their names. Her voice was almost spiteful, as if they were the world's equivalent to Nazis. Yeah, they came out of nowhere and conquered as they went. They would attack, raid, and loot everything, and take as many people for slaves as they could, men, women, and even children. Didn't matter to them. I told them everything I remembered from the history class, but that wasn't much. I think they mostly attacked port cities, though. I can't say that I paid much attention to the stories from my arcane history class, but that definitely sounds like them, with one major difference, Zuma said. What? They didn't take slaves, really? I guess that makes sense. Your species is rather small. I nodded my head, thinking about it. They did eat a lot of people, though, she mentioned. What? I yelled, too loudly, and several Niama looked at us, startled. They didn't do that in your world, she wondered. Not that I know of, I said. I thought about it for a moment, and I reasoned that the Vikings probably couldn't understand Sumer like I can, meaning to them, they were just birds with magic. Hopefully, that's what happened anyways. Well, I wouldn't put it past them, Sumer scoffed, but really, it was more of a chirp. Hey, Sumer, I want to practice my magic a bit. Can you give me some pointers? I asked, changing the topic to something less disgusting than cannibalism. Sumer hesitated for a moment. I can try, but chaos magic is very different from order magic. What I know may not translate very well. Well, you showed me how to use summoning magic. Can't be that different, I pointed out. True, Sumer said. I guess there is no harm in trying. And I guess that I need my new sword and shield too, I added. Yes, we need to do that before you leave today, or we'll at least find a place for my home to store it safely, she said. I'll fly ahead and summon you once I'm in the training area. With that, Sumer spread her wings and took off. While waiting, I thought that it would be fun to try out some magic. Okay then, something simple, water from the air. I started closing my eyes and reaching out my hand into a pool of energy, just like I did when Sumer tested to see where my magic was coming from. After I felt the power start to flow, I pictured water vapor accumulating in my hand. I pictured it taking the shape of a ball. When I opened my eyes, a small baseball-sized orb of water was floating just in front of me. I played with it for a moment, stretching it out, compressing it flat. I even froze it and then finally turned it to steam. Just as I'd done that, Sumer said that she'd arrived and began summoning me. Hey, you! Someone yelled from behind me. Yes, I said as I turned around to see who it was. But just as I did, I felt something big and heavy hit my face, hard. Then everything went black. End of chapter. Chapter 29. Hey, you! Someone yelled from behind me. Yes, I said as I turned around to see who it was. Just as I did, I felt something big and heavy hit my face, hard. Then everything went black. The next thing I remember was Sumer standing over me, panicking and casting some kind of magic. Also, my nose was in tremendous pain. Oh! I groaned and grabbed my nose. Jake, thank goodness, you had me worried there for a second. You collapsed just after appearing, and blood started pouring out of your face. I cast healing on you, but I'm not overly familiar with your biology, so I couldn't reset your nose. What happened? Sumer said in a panicked voice. I think I just got hey-you'd, I said. There was a moment of silence before Sumer replied, Hey-you'd? It means someone called my attention, then hit me as soon as I turned around, I explained. I examined my nose. It was definitely broken and with obscene amounts of pain. And my eyes were watering and my whole face throbbed. Sumer, I need you to set my nose. I'll explain how. Thankfully, after I first got summoned all those years ago, I did a lot of research into first aid treatment. I explained to Sumer as much as I knew, and instructed her how to reset my nose by pushing it back into place. I couldn't tell, but that part seemed to make her uneasy. I also explained how human bones grow and repair themselves just in case that I had any facial damage that the broken nose was distracting me from feeling. After a few quick spells, and a lot of screaming on my part when she reset my nose, I was all patched up and very tired. Sumer, why am I so suddenly exhausted? Healing takes energy. You probably burned through quite a few calories when I healed you. You should be fine after some food and rest, at least. That's how it is with Nyama, she explained. Makes sense, I said, laying on the ground on my back. I think maybe you should set me back before I fall asleep here. You don't want to find out who, hey-you'd you? Sumer asked. Not right now, I said, half asleep. I know he said that we would teach you magic, but I think maybe we should do it after you recover, Suma suggested. I didn't say anything back. I just grunted in agreement. Suma sent me back after that, and I reappeared back in my living room, still lying on the floor. Normally, I'd be asleep in my bed, but instead I just grabbed one of the pillows from the couch and a blanket, and I slept on the floor so that I didn't have to move. I woke up 10 hours later, absolutely starving, but with more energy and no pain. I ate 5 granola bars and 2 cups of instant ramen, a whole box of Pop-Tarts, and a bowl of cereal. Then I decided to call Suma and tell her that I was awake. Suma, I just woke up. I'm feeling a lot better. There was no response. I figured that she might be in the sleep, so I would just call her later. I checked the time, 12:39 a.m. Well then, there goes my normal sleep schedule, I said disappointedly. All the time in Suma's world is messing with my body's clock. I wondered to myself if Suma's world proper name was, as it hadn't occurred to me to ask. I decided that I would the next time I saw her. I checked my phone for the first time since I woke up. It said that I had 12 missed calls from work and 3 from family and friends. Great, I moaned. I can't call them back now, they're all asleep. I guess I can later. Until then, I had some cleaning and junk to do. I put away my dishes and searched for cool names for my sword and shield online and topped it all off with watching TV until 9 a.m. Finally, I called most of the people who called me. It was mostly my mom asking how my day was and a friend wanting to know if I was free that weekend. But I knew my work wasn't calling about that. I'd missed an entire day and hadn't called anyone to let them know that I wasn't coming in. I called my boss back at about 11 o'clock and prepared myself for the worst. Jake, he answered the phone. Hi, Mr. Vidal, I said, trying to sound much more calm than I actually was. Jake, are you okay? You missed work yesterday and you didn't call anyone, he asked. Sorry about that. I was with a friend and someone knocked me out. I spent several hours passed out from pain meds. I only just woke up last night at midnight, I explained. You were attacked. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine now. The doctor had thought that I broke my nose, but luckily I got away with a mild concussion, I lied. You shouldn't sleep with a concussion, Jake, Mr. Vidal said. Yeah, but those meds didn't give me much choice, I laughed. Well, are you going to be able to come into work today? He asked. Yes, sir. I'll see you in a bit, I said. We said goodbye, and I hung up the phone. I decided to try and call Suma again. Hey, Suma, are you there? I heard a yawn, followed by a, Hey, Jake, feeling better? Yeah, I'm fine now. Hey, can you summon me in about 10 minutes? Sure, I guess. Why? She asked. I want to name my sword and shield, and I finally picked them, and I just need a few minutes to get ready. Okay, she said. Just let me know when you're ready. With that, I went around my house, grabbing a few things I thought might come in handy, and throwing them into my backpack. Okay, Suma, I'm ready. End of chapter. Chapter 30. Okay, she said. Just let me know when you're ready. With that, I went around my house, grabbing a few things that I thought might come in handy and throwing them into my backpack. Okay, Suma, I'm ready. My feet, legs, and torso, and finally head all disappeared, and the world went black. Normally, when I was summoned, it was like a long blink. Then I'm in Suma's world. But this time, it was different. I stayed in the blackness for longer. Too long. I began to panic, but calmed down once I saw the light. Literally, I saw a small flicker of light distantly in that endless darkness. Sentinel! The light called out to me in a thunderous voice. It echoed in my ears and my mind, as if it were both telepathy and physical sound. Some force began to draw me closer to the light, like I was falling towards it. What's going on? I wondered. I felt strangely calm, despite having no idea what was happening. Once I got close enough, I realized what the light was. It was a figure of the flame that had been there when Suma named me. This time, I could see that it was much more clearly. It was humanoid, for the most part, but had colossal leathery wings and a python-sized tail with spikes at the end. It was made entirely out of what seemed like fire or raw energy. Looking at it felt like staring at the sun. Sentinel! He called out again, but softer this time, and his voice was more human now. What are you? I asked as I came to a floating stop before it. I was maybe 20 feet away from him, and I saw that his body was shifting and remolding itself. Parts of it would be fairly human, then immediately shift to something more reptilian. "I am," it said in a human voice, but instantly it switched to a thunderous voice again, and its head took on a more reptilian features. "Your doom!" The head transformed back into a humanish shape and spoke once again in a calm voice. "Your friend." "You have a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing going on there." Just as I said that, I started falling again, this time away from the figure. "Kill! Protect," the figure said as my eyes opened, and I was staring at Suma, who was perched on a tree branch a few feet away.
"So, you decided on a name, huh?"
she said cheerfully. End of chapter. Chapter 31.
"So you decided on a name, huh?"
she said cheerfully. I tried to blink and shake the fog out of my brain, but no matter how hard I tried, I still felt like I woke up from some kind of fevered dream. One that grew fuzzier the longer I was awake. I think I saw the figure on the flame again, the one from the time I became your familiar. The Grand Sanctum. Remember? I said, trying to focus on everything I saw. But the harder I thought, the more it slipped away from me. "What? When?" Suma asked, shocked. "When you summoned me. How long was I gone for?" I said, sitting on the ground and placing my throbbing head between my legs.
"Gone? What do you mean? I summoned you and then you appeared, just like always."
It felt a lot longer than that from my perspective. I talked to him. Whatever. It was bipolar as heck, I joked. Suma started, but I cut her off. He was switching back and forth between aggressive and friendly. His voice, body, personality, everything. It all kept changing as we talked. He wanted to kill me and protect me, I explained.
"What did he look like?"
Suma wondered. I don't quite remember. It's all so fuzzy now, like I was dreaming, I said. "Do your people dream?" I wondered.
"Of course," she scoffed, "but I've never remembered mine afterwards."
"Me neither, but this definitely wasn't a dream. I know the difference," I said.
"I know I've said this before, but you certainly are a weird familiar sometimes," Suma laughed. "So, did he say anything important?"
I thought for a moment, trying to recall what happened as best I could. "I don't think so." I stood up again, my headache fading away. "He mostly just said that he was my doom and my friend."
"What do you want to do about it?"
Suma questioned, with her head tilted curiously. "Nothing yet," I said after a moment of pause to think. "Even if I wanted to right now, I wouldn't know what to do or where to begin."
"So what do you want to do then?"
she asked. "What I came here to do for now. Let's go name my sword and shield," I said, looking around for my weapons. I found them where I'd left them yesterday, laying on top of a stone under a shade of a large tree.
"So you have names then?"
Suma chirped. "Yes, I do. Let's begin with the shield first," I said, and held the shield out. Suma landed on my shoulder, and I moved it close enough for her to touch it, just like last time. She cast the spell, and a blue magic circle formed on it and wrapped itself around the shield. Another formed around both of our feet.
"Now name it," she said.
"Aegis," I said. The magic circle changed from a brilliant blue to a burning red, then faded away.
"Aegis?"
Suma asked. "Yeah, a great warrior from my world's mythology used a shield by that name," I said. Suma nodded her head in understanding.
"Okay, are you ready to do the sword?"
"Absolutely," I answered. We repeated the process once more, and when Suma told me to name it, I shouted out, "Mori!" And just as before, the circle shifted from blue to red, then vanished.
"And what mythical hero used a sword named Mori?"
Suma asked. "None that I know of. In a dead language of my world, Mori means death, or to die. It's a fitting name for this one, I thought," I said.
"Ah, so you speak some of your world's forgotten languages?" Suma asked.
"Of course," I lied. I read about it on Reddit, actually, but she didn't need to know that. "Anyway, let's try these out," I said excitedly.
"How do you want to test it?"
Suma asked, and flew over to a low-hanging tree branch. I looked around at the ground, then the trees, and then finally at Suma. "I don't think you could lift a stick up and whack me with it, so why don't you just cast an attack spell at me?" I suggested. Suma looked nervously at the ground they'd shifted on her branch.
"I don't know. That doesn't seem like a great idea," she said hesitantly.
"It needs to be able to defend against magic as well as physical attacks, so it's better to find out if it can in practice than on the battlefield," I told her. She still seemed uneasy, but agreed, and took a position on a rock a few meters away. Ready? She asked warily. Ready, I confirmed. Suma closed her eyes for a moment and then snapped them open again as she began to speak. Flames gather in my presence, form and shape into a bolt and pierce my enemies. As she spoke, small embers began to flicker in front of her and stretch out into a dart-like shape. Then they erupted into a scorching yellow flames. Fly, crimson bolt, she shouted, and the bolt of fire flew at me at the speed of a thrown softball. I instinctively raised my shield to cover my head and positioned my body behind it as well. I felt the force of the magic hit my shield, but it didn't pierce through. I peeked my head over slowly and examined the shield before looking back at Suma. I think it worked, I said, smiling like a goofball. Are you okay? She asked, worried. I'm perfectly fine. I just blocked everything. I didn't even feel the heat, I told her. She sighed, relieved. Now let's test the summoning part. I placed Igus on the ground and walked away a few meters before calling it out to it. Just like Destiny, it disappeared in a flash and reappeared right back at my left arm, just like I wanted. Ready to test Mori? Suma asked. I said, sending Igus away and summoning Mori. Mori! It almost instantly blinked into existence in my right hand. Well, that past works, I joked. It's a weapon made to cut things, right? What will you test it on? Suma wondered. First, I want to test the balance. I took fencing in high school, so I know how I can use it, but I'm worried about its strength. I'll just test its edge later on some fruit and logs, I explained. I started swinging the sword a bit, just some simple thrusts and downward slashes at first. But once I started to get a feel for it, I began doing mock parries and other advanced techniques. I could feel Suma's eyes on me, staring in some mix of awe and concern. I sent Mori away and asked if she had any fruit. Suma snapped out of fixation and jolted. Huh? Oh yes, in town we can buy several kinds of fruit. I asked her to fly there and then summon me so that I could buy some to test Mori with. She took off, and I was left alone. Or so I thought. Hey, you! End of chapter. Chapter 32. Hey, you! Someone shouted from behind me. My first instinct was to turn around and see who was calling me, but my mind went right back to the last time I did that. In a flash, I summoned Igus and whipped around to protect myself. Then I summoned Mormi and prepared to fight just in case. Once I was facing the person who called me, I saw what I looked like 3 nobles and their beast familiars. That's him, your lordship. That's the familiar who called Unwell, one of them said to the most decorated of the 3. He was the largest of them all and had several grey feathers, indicating that he was quite old. The old one had many gold laces around his body, as well as the large jewels, and the other 2 didn't have. Are you sure? The old Niema asked in a gruff voice. Yes, Magistrate Gakil. The younger noble talking turned to me. I will never forget that disgusting ape. The older Niema, Magistrate Gakil, turned to me and began speaking. Investigator Mankin may have ruled in your favor, but it is inconceivable that a familiar could kill a high-ranking noble's son and be allowed to live. I will rectify that situation. As soon as he said that, his lizard-like familiar reared up on its hind legs and opened its now glowing red mouth. It then dropped its body and shot a ball of fire at me. I pushed my shield out and moved behind it as much as possible, but the force of the blast still knocked me off balance for a moment. I need some breathing room, I said quietly to myself and sent Mori away, then used shadow chanting to summon Destiny. I threw it as hard as I could and flung it straight into the open mouth of the familiar that was charging up another shot. It went down its throat and killed it, causing it to fall forward with a thud. Destiny! I called out, and she reappeared back in my hand. The 2 lesser nobles stepped back in fear, but not the older one. Impressive. Well, that was just a salamander. Let's see how you handle my prized familiar. Igos! A magic circle formed around the ground between myself and the 3 nobles, and a large horse-sized monster began to appear. It had scales, leathery wings, a short fat neck, and a long tail with spikes at the end. Behold! One of the lesser dragon species. A drake, the magistrate said smugly. A freaking dragon, I screamed in my head. Suma, I shouted. I don't care where you are and what you're doing, but you need to summon me now. What? Why? She asked through our mental connection. I'm under attack by the 3 nobles and his pet dragon." "What?" she yelled. "Okay, one moment." Just as she said that, the drake opened its mouth and sprayed fire at me. My shield blocked most of it, but my legs and elbows got burnt bad. "No!" I yelled in pain as I thrust my destiny into the still open mouth. Instead of killing it, the drake backed up slightly and then bit into the spear, shattering the wooden haft and breaking off the tip, which it promptly spat into the floor. The metal tip laid on the ground, glowing red hot. I tried whacking the drake with the shaft, but it didn't seem to notice. "Maury!" I shouted, and it appeared in my hand, taking the place of Destiny's remains. I looked down, and the metal tip had disappeared as well, leaving only smoldering grass where it had been laying. "A new weapon won't save you, familiar. You die today," he said, and cast some kind of spell that enveloped all of us in a greenish energy. "Jake, get ready," Zuma said. I smiled and laughed at the nobles. "Not today. Bye." I waited for a moment, and another. But nothing happened. "Jake, something's wrong. I'm trying to summon you, but nothing's happening." Zuma sounded panic. The nobles started laughing. "Did you really think that it was going to be that easy? We took precautions to prevent your escape. A perpetual ritual means to keep a familiar from being summoned away. We simply needed to activate it after confirming that Igius would be enough to kill you," the old magistrate boasted. "Zuma, he's using some kind of ritual to keep me here," I said. "I'm sorry, I'm on my way back," she yelled. "Just hold on." I swung Maury at the drake and caught it at the neck, leaving a gash, but not killing it, unfortunately. It let out a pain screech and swiped at me with its claws, which left punctured holes at Igus, but not large ones, and knocked me back. A familiar that relies totally on tools and physical strength to fight. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You are the familiar, a low-class wretch who barely passed 5th-level support mage. Despite his words, I don't think he expected Maury to be able to hurt his drake. His voice had lost its pride, and was now much colder and more calculating. "I guess, get him." The drake growled and took another swipe at me, but I quickly stepped back, dodging its attack. It spun around and used its tail to knock me off my feet, causing me to hit the ground hard. I rolled out of the way just as it sprayed the area of the ground that I was on with its fire again, barely avoiding getting burned. The drake then attempted to crush me with its tail while I was on the ground and running away, and it would have too if I hadn't thrust Maury into its path, forcing it to reel back and stop its attack. I scrambled to my feet and backed up out of its range of its claws and tail, and tried summoning Destiny so that I can try throwing it at the drake from a distance. As soon as it appeared, the metal tip fell to the ground at the exact spot the drake had broken it earlier. "Good to know, bad to find out," I mumbled to myself and resummoned Maury. I tried thinking of a strategy, but the drake didn't give me much time. Its attacks very quick and in succession. It took everything I had just to keep myself from getting cut in half or burnt. It was just a massive understatement to say that I was grateful for Igus. "I'm almost there, Jake. Hold on," Zuma yelled. I thought about trying magic, but I needed to focus to do that. And this drake wasn't going to let me close my eyes and imagine a fireball. It reared up and came back down with a thud. I expected another spray of fire, but instead was greeted with a huge blast that threw me back and knocked Igus out of my arm, breaking my arm in the process. "Ah!" I yelled, grabbing my arm that was now broken at the elbow. "This is for my son," the magistrate said, and the drake towered over me, readying another blast of fire. I thought I was dead. I readied myself for pain. But instead of dying, I heard Zuma yell, "Fly, Crimson Bolt!" The bolt of magic hit the fire drake square in the head, sending it toppling over. Zuma landed between me and the drake and immediately cast a spell that started healing me. She wasn't able to do much, but she was able to mostly fix my elbow before the drake got up and prepared to attack again. "I'm sorry, Jake. Shouldn't have left you alone." "I'm fine. Let's just get through this," I said, and grabbed her to retreat from the drake. We were able to make it out of the green energy field, but the drake and the nobles still pursued us. The drake was big, but it was too slow, so we were able to stay ahead of it. But the lesser nobles had familiars of their own, and they were not as slow. Some kind of hyena thing bit my leg and caused me to trip, but I stabbed it with Maury and started running again. Suma was dealing with the white cat-like familiar of the other lesser noble by staying too high for it to reach and shooting fire at it. However, she underestimated it, and the feline familiar jumped straight up 20 feet and caught Suma on the wing with its paws. She fell down and hit the ground. I jumped in and stabbed the familiar before it could get to Suma, though. "Suma, are you okay?" I yelled as I picked her up. She didn't respond. I started running again while holding Suma, but was cut off by a wall of fire made by the magistrate. "Nowhere to run, you low-class piece of trash," he sneered. I considered charging through the flames and almost did, but that might have hurt Suma more than she could handle. I looked at the nobles and was filled with so much anger. They'd burned me, broken my arm, and tried to kill me. All of that was one thing, but Suma was non-responsive. She might have been dead, and all that anger and pain did something. It started pouring out its magic. Before I knew it, I had enveloped the area that we were all standing in my own field of navy blue magical enemy. "I am going to kill you!" I bellowed. End of chapter. Part 33. "I'm gonna kill you!" I bellowed. The navy blue magic that had been emanating from me began to swirl violently like a tornado. It was so strong that the nymphs had to land and huddle on the ground behind the drake. The drake itself seemed unaffected by the tempest and prepared to spray its fire at Suma and me. I summoned Aigis and raised it to defend us, but it had been punctured so many times that fire would still make it through, even if only a little. I threw it on my back and held Suma close to my chest and added a layer to protect her. I didn't mind getting burned so long as she was safe. The drake launched its attack, and I prepared for the burning pain to hit me. And it did. Kind of. It burned, but not from the heat. It was absolutely freezing. I turned to look back at the drake and saw it clawing at its own mouth, which was now frozen over. "Inversion," I said to myself. Seeing my opportunity, I put Suma down and covered her with Aigis, then summoned Mori and slashed at the drake's neck again. This time, the wound was deep, and based on how much blood there was, I hit something important. But it didn't go down right away. It took a slash at me with its claws, and without Aigis, it left a deep wound, but not fatal. It was moving slower, probably because it was cold and that it was cold-blooded. "Kill him immediately," the magistrate ordered from his little huddle. The drake huffed and started to sway. It must have been getting lightheaded from the blood loss. This time, when it reached out to slash at me, it was like I was swimming in molasses. I dodged to the side and brought Mori down on its wrist, severing its hand entirely. It screeched and threw its hand and head up in pain, which left the perfect opening. I thrust Mori straight into its throat, finally killing it. The nobles looked as if they had just seen a Grim Reaper himself, and if Suma was dead, they may as well have. I ran to Suma to check on her, forgetting the nobles for a moment. Part of me hoped they left. Another part of me hoped that they did something stupid to give me a reason. "Suma!" I said gently, shaking her. I saw her eyes twitch and saw a slight up and down of her breathing. She was alive. He killed the drake," one of them said. It was one of the former lesser nobles. How is that possible?" "Shut up!" the magistrate snapped at him. "Just summon more familiars. We'll get him. He's injured. He can't go on much longer." "But, sir, Look around. Can't you feel it?" the other noble said, sounding terrified. "It's chaos magic. Like he is some kind of Viking or demon." I hadn't noticed yet, but the energy I was emitting wasn't going away. It was still pouring out of me, but it was no longer swirling around. "I don't care if he's a chaos dragon himself. Now summon your familiars and kill him." "But, sir, we don't have any more familiars," one of them said. I stood up just as the magistrate scoffed at the lesser nobles and began summoning one of his familiars. It wasn't a drake this time. It was a borag. That was fine with me. I'd taken the last couple of moments to focus on my magic and imagine a spell of sorts. Well, calling it a spell might be an exaggeration. It was really more of a wild idea. I compressed my magic down as far as I could and made it into as dense as I could hold. Then I imagined it shooting out of my opponent like a bolt of lightning or a beam of light. It was all focused on my hand. All I had to do was aim.
Some pitiful spell won't save you. Borags may not have much in the way of life force density, but that makes them more resistant to life force attacks and spells that affect the body. This is where you finally pay. No, Jack, attack!
The Borag lunged forward. However, it was straight into my spell. I didn't want to cast an effect. I wanted to create an equivalent of a high-powered water cutter with magical energy. I let loose the built-up mana all at once, and it tore through the Borag's entire body in an instant, as well as several boulders and trees behind it. From the front of its skull to the back of its hindquarters, it was a clean 3-inch hole through the length of its body. It crumpled to the floor with a disgusting squished thump. The magistrate stepped back in horror.
No, that's not... No.
The magistrate let his words trail off for a moment, but then erupted into a sickening laugh.
Well, if you want something done right...
He raised his wingtip to the sky. An enormous ball of fire formed as the other two cowered behind him, both of their eyes transfixed on me. I looked around. The inversion magic was filling the area. That fireball wasn't going to work. I didn't even have to try and stop him. I let him build it up as much as he wanted. He hurt Suma, so I want him to feel like I do at that exact moment. I want him to feel the frustration and rage I was feeling, knowing that no matter how I tried, it wasn't going to work on me. Go ahead, I dared him. I won't even try and stop you. But know one thing. When your fireball fails, my sword won't. He seemed shocked for a moment, then screamed as he brought the ball of fire down around me. I have to admit, it was the coldest thing I ever felt in my entire life, and the most mind-boggling experience. To be completely engulfed in flames and feel cold was odd, to say the least. Once the flames cleared up a bit, I watched as the magistrate's pride and sadistic glee vanished and was replaced by absolute horror at the sight of me standing completely unharmed. "Run," I said simply. The two lesser nobles listened and immediately flew away. The magistrate, however, stayed. I don't think it was bravery, though. I think he just lost hope and resigned himself to die. He fell face down on the floor and began to sing. I ignored him and walked over to check on Suma again. She was just beginning to regain consciousness. Did we live?" she asked. End of chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web novel Humans Don't Make Good Familiars, taken from Reddit with the author's approval. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 34. All the fire blast and fogs of chaos magic eventually drew other Niema to the area, who, in turn, called for the gods. I found out what happened later from Suma, as I'd passed out and stayed out for the solid 24 hours. Suma spent some time healing my wounds while I was out, and she was interrogated as well. I later learned that Suma consented on my behalf for them to perform another memory dub on me. With that, they were able to gain evidence needed to arrest the two former lesser nobles, as well as the now former magistrate. His noble title was stripped from him and given to the next in line of his family, his oldest son. I heard a rumor that he tried to kill himself, but it was never confirmed. When I did wake up, I was starving and sore, but all of my burns had healed and only a bit of the stiffness remained in my elbow. Suma had been tended to as well. The blow from the white cat familiar broke one of her wings and legs, but she was up and about by the time I was awake again. I also apparently continued to emit that fog of magical energy for another hour after losing consciousness, and it didn't disperse for nearly 6 hours. They actually had to remove everyone from the area because all their spells kept getting inverted. "I heard you finally woke up," Investigator Hull said, flying into the room that I was in. "How are you doing?" "Better," I said, and took a big bite of something called magoipa. "My arm is a bit sore, though," I said, with a full mouth. "You sure have a knack for getting into trouble, it seems. but everything has been sorted out, so I don't think you have much to worry about with the former magistrate's family, DeHull said. Suppose that's a relief, I said, after swallowing. Oh, and you have a visitor, he said. Suma, I asked. Not exactly, he said. Meanwhile, another nymph, much larger and well-decorated, flew in. Hello, Jake, he said. My name is Udaka Sopra. I am the Grand Duke of the Royal Citadel and of the country of Ambos. It is nice to meet you. Magistrate Kakil's POV. Do you remember what the worst day of your life is? I do. It was when the city guard showed up at my home and told me that my son, my youngest child, had been murdered by some low-class wretch. I had many favors owed to me as an influential member of noble society, and I called on as many as I needed to find out who did it. I found out that there were 2 witnesses, lesser nobles who had their titles stripped from them after the fact, a mockery of the highest order. I had them brought to me, and they told me everything. They told me who killed my son, and they told me how he died in agony. There is no greater sorrow than the fury of apparent mourning, and likewise no greater rage can be kindled than a parent who seeks vengeance. I spent countless gold pieces and emptied storehouses full of mana reserves to purchase a pre-prepared ritual that can stop a familiar from being summoned. It was so expensive because the ritual of that nature is illegal by royal decree. But I didn't care. Not then. Not now. If I had to empty every storehouse in Ambos to kill the familiar and his master, then I would. The ritual was stored on a jewel, and when I wanted to activate it, then all I had to do was input some mana. I planned my trap. Burst myself and 2 now-defunct nobles would corner the familiar after its master had left it alone. Then one of them would send out a salamander familiar so as to probe the familiar's strength. If the salamander proved inefficient, I will utilize the ritual of summoning of my own personal familiar, Aegeus, a lesser dragon species called Drake. A few days later, the familiar proved stronger than predicted. It is not immediately killed by Aegeus and was even able to contact his master and attempt to flee. They made it outside the effective area of the ritual. But it didn't matter as the master had been neutralized already. There was no escape anymore. The familiar was at its end now, attempting to radiate magic in a desperate effort to save its life and the life of its master. Aegeus would make a quick work of him, but I wanted him to suffer like my son did. I would make his last moments on Atmosia one of torment, and I would do it with my own hand. At least, that's what I thought as I brought out a large ball of fire as I could muster onto the vermin's head. For a moment, I felt peace, justice, and joy at having avenged my son. But then it was all stolen by that thing once more. It emerged from the flames unscathed, and it spoke only a single, soul-crushing word to me. It told me to run. I don't know if it was out of defiance or sorrow, but I did not run. I stayed. Part of me wanted to die. Another, much larger part of me wanted something I knew would never have. My son back in my embrace. And vengeance. Investigator DeHull's POV. DeHull, we have reports of nobles fighting just outside of the town, one of the guards under my command said after barging in. Again, I replied annoyed. I stood up from my resting perch and followed him to the area. To my surprise, the people involved were faces I'd seen before, Suma and a familiar sentinel, or Jake. When I arrived, Suma was being tended to by a healer for a broken wing and leg, and Jake was unconscious and radiating some form of blue magical energy. I tried to enter it, but was warned away. Apparently, magic doesn't work right inside the field, and they had to move everyone away from Jake so that they could cast healing and other types of magic to investigate the area. Suma, I called out to her. What happened? 3 noblemen attacked us. I was knocked unconscious, but Jake defended me, Sumer explained. I looked over at Jake through the thick fog of energy and saw him laying on the ground. I went closer and spotted what appeared to be a dismembered corpse of a drake. Jake did that, I whispered to myself. It took a while, but Jake did eventually stop producing that energy, and we were able to recover him from the fog. We had to drag him out by his feet with our borax to perform healing on him afterwards, but we managed it. He didn't wake up for a full day. Honestly, I thought he was going to die, but he was strong and recovered. While he was asleep, Sumer gave us permission to do a memory delve for some answers, and we found a lot more than we bargained for. Jake was dreaming when the delve was performed, and our memory mage found out the hard way that what he was dreaming of. Apparently, he was dreaming of the battle in which Jake had been burned, stabbed, and nearly crushed and beaten, but still kept fighting. He managed to kill a drake, take full force blast of flames without damage, and protect his master all before finally losing consciousness. Our mage had to repeatedly stop to get her bearings, or to stop crying. By the time it was over, all our delver would say was, Vikings. End of chapter. Chapter 35. Sumer and I were released without incident, except for the strange staring that Dahal kept doing when he thought I wasn't looking, and a lengthy conversation with the Grand Duke Duca Sopra. He asked me if I was okay, and other questions about the attack. Then he started to ask me about, well, me. To be fair, I just killed a drake, something that is difficult for a trained group of experienced mages, apparently, and in one-on-one combat. So I guess I should have expected people to be curious. He asked me about where I was from, what I did, about my magic. He was quite surprised to hear that it was a form of chaos magic, or at least I think he was. I'm getting better at telling, but I'm still not perfect. Eventually, Sumer joined us, and she answered a few questions as well before the Grand Duke thanked us both, while speaking with him and excused himself, wishing us both a safe day. Before going, he also assured us that we would do everything in his power to punish the nobles who attacked us, and he would make an example of them in case any others got an idea of revenge. I decided not to go home for a couple days after the attack, just in case any more nobles tried to attack Sumer. Just like last time, I rented a room from a nearby kennel and paid with my mana. Then Sumer and I did something that we were dreading for a while.
What did you do? It's only been 3 days.
The Niema who made Destiny, Ori and Igus squawked.
How did you even put these holes in it?
He said angrily as he examined the shield.
And what happened to the spear? It looks like you smashed it against a boulder. Why is the tempering of the metal tip ruined?
The more he talked, the more depressed he sounded. I know. I'm sorry, I said. But we were attacked, and everything got kind of broken in the fight. Well, except Mori. The sword. The Niema blacksmith smite.
Well, I guess I knew that this would happen on a level eventually. I just didn't expect it so soon.
He shook his head and used magic to lift up Igus. He looked over it again and then back at me.
So did they at least do well?
Yeah, they did. Igus, the shield took everything like a champ. I would have been skewered without it. And Destiny gave me range when I needed it. I took out several of those nobles' familiars with her. That drake would have killed me if I hadn't had them all, I told him. When I said the word drake, his head perked up a bit, and the feathers on his head did too.
A drake, you say?
His voice sounding much lighter.
The things I made help beat a drake.
He started standing a bit taller now, and his chest was even poked out a bit more.
Well, how about that?
So, can they be fixed? I wondered. He looked over everything one more time.
The shield will need to be patched and welded back together, but it is doable. The spear, however, that might be a lost cause. At least the shaft, anyway. I could retemper the metal, but there is always a chance the wooden shaft will break again. You might want to consider ordering a new one out of the metal tube. That way it'll be harder to break and easier to repair, he explained.
How much is this all going to cost? Sumer spoke up.
I won't lie, probably a lot. Maybe a whole dull jar, he said.
How much is that? I asked. A lot. A Daljar is what we use to store mana outside of our bodies. One Daljar could hold 2 whole days' worth of mana from 2 normal Niyama, or maybe half a day for your current court mage, she explained. Can I pay half now and half on completion? I asked the blacksmith. He wobbled his head back and forth in a thinking motion, and then said, Well, I don't know for sure how much it'll cost until it's all said and done, but if you want to put down a payment, then that's fine with me. He went into another room for a moment and brought back a small jar-looking thing about the size of his body. How do you carry that? I wondered. It's lighter than it looks. Also, it's empty, he replied and scooted in front of me. Just put in as much as you can manage, and we can worry about the rest later. I knew how to do this part, as it was pretty similar to when I paid for my room at the kennel. Only this jar was a lot bigger. I placed my hand on the top and started forcing my mana into the jar. I had to be careful. The first time at the kennel, I tried this and it broke the jar. Slowly, I let the mana flow into the container, but unlike the kennel, I didn't feel any resistance, so I let the flow a bit harder, assuming that I was holding back too much. Are you okay, Jake? Asuma asked a moment later. Yeah, I'm fine, I said with my eyes still closed, trying to focus and not breaking the bottle. Are you sure, son? The blacksmith asked, sounding a bit worried. Yeah, why? I asked, opening my eyes and seeing that the jar was almost full and glowing brightly enough that it would have us avert our eyes. I immediately stopped, as I hadn't wanted to accidentally lose control and break the bottle. Sorry. The blacksmith peeked around the wing as he was using to shield his eyes from the light. It didn't do that the last time you paid, did it? Suma paid last time, I said. Speaking of which, it didn't cost this much to have it made. Why is it so much to have it repaired? Most of the price is the metal tube. It's difficult hollowing out a metal rod, the Niyama said, still side-eyeing the glowing doll jar. Jake, did this happen when you paid for your room? Suma asked. I don't know. The thing I used then wasn't see-through, I said to her. Why are you hollowing out a pre-built rod? Why not just use flat sheet and then roll it? I asked, turning back to the blacksmith. Evenly heating a hollow tube with flame magic is nearly impossible alone, and unless you want to pay a higher price, I can't hire someone to help me, he said. I thought for a moment as he covered up the brightly glowing doll jar with a rag, allowing us all to open our eyes again. Can I see your working area? I asked. I wanted to see how you create fire with magic and how you mold the metal. My question seemed to catch him off guard, but he agreed, and we walked to his back room. Suma excused herself, saying that she had other business to attend to. I think she just didn't want to watch. Okay, let's fire up the forge, the blacksmith said, and placed a wingtip on the small red symbol emblazoned on the side of the brick and metal box. The symbol began to glow, and the magic circle formed in the center of the box. Then it erupted into flames. End of chapter. Okay, let's fire up the forge, the blacksmith said, and placed a wingtip on the small red symbol emblazoned on the side of the brick and metal box. The symbol began to glow, and the magic circle formed in the center of the box. Then it erupted into flames. First, we need to prepare our materials, he said, as he flew over to a small pile of metal rods in the corner of his shop. He pointed one of his graying wingtips at one of them, and a yellow glow enveloped the rod, and it began to float towards the table with runes etched into the top. What are these for? I asked, gesturing at the engravings. Different things. One is for holding the metal in place, another for keeping it hot so it is more malleable, and the final one is to cool it off slowly for the tempering process, he explained. I didn't know much about metalwork in my world, but I did know that this was probably something the blacksmith on Earth would kill a man for. Impressive, I said. Really? Those are pretty standard runes for metalwork. Are they uncommon on your world? He asked, as he pressed the rune of forge again, making the flames grow even bigger. Magic doesn't exist in my world. We have metalwork, though, I told him, and when I did, he looked like I'd been speaking gibberish. A world without magic? How can such a thing exist, let alone have metalwork? He sounded flabbergasted. We use a gas called propane to create fire hot enough to heat the metal, And as far as the shaping, I think they use automatic machine hammers now, I explained, but he still seemed confused. I spent a few minutes explaining what I did know about Earth's metalworking, which was not much, while the blacksmith nymph sat in stunned silence and occasionally asking a question. Some of the questions I could answer, but most I couldn't. Our conversation had lasted so long that the forge almost went cold and needed to have more mana put into it. He was about to do that himself, but I thought that it would be a good opportunity to learn how to use runes properly. So I asked him to show me and explain how to use the forge's rune. "It's pretty simple," he stated. "Just make contact with the rune and then start flowing your mana into it." "May I try?" I asked. He nodded his head, and I placed a hand on the rune and followed his instructions. Flowing mana into it was easy enough, just like paying for something. But as soon as I did, the rune glowed a bright red, and the forge nearly exploded. Flames began pouring out of the furnace's opening so quickly that the blacksmith thought it best to close the door. "It wasn't like that when you did it," I pointed out. "You must have put in quite a bit of mana," he said. "The more mana that goes into a rune, the stronger the effect." I wiped some sweat off my brow. The forge had been going for a while, and the room was getting hot enough that I was glad once he closed the furnace door. "So, can you show me how to make the rods float like that?" I asked. "Of course, it's pretty simple, actually," he said, and floated one towards me for a practice on. "Just imagine wrapping the whole bar in a blanket of mana and manipulate that, as if you're picking it up by strings rather than the bar itself." It made sense to me, so I gave it a try. I closed my eyes and held the bar in my hand, then imagined closing a wave of mana around the entire bar and lifting that mana up. I felt the metal leave my hand and opened my eyes to see it floating. "You're a natural," he said, and floated the bar into a small open window of the furnace. "Thanks, by the way. How long will it take for the metal to heat up?" I asked. "Not long, it's a flame rune, and the sides of the furnace are made of stones that reflect a lot of heat. So, for a bar this size, 10 minutes, he explained. The time went by fast as I continued practicing moving the bar around and controlling it. "Do you want to do the honors of putting the bar out and placing it on the table?" "I'd love to," I replied and went over to assist him. "Okay, just be careful that you don't lose control and drop it. It'll be glowing red hot and might burn you if it touches you," he told me. I carefully wrapped my mana around the bar and slowly pulled it from the flames. But as soon as it was out, we noticed a problem. It wasn't red hot. In fact, it wasn't hot at all. And neither was the forge. I couldn't feel any heat coming from it. "Oh, no," I realized. I'm sorry. I think I've inverted the forge with my magic," I explained. "What do you mean?" the Neum asked. "My magic is inversion. I can invert the types of any form of magic. I guess when I used the rune, I must have caused the fire rune to turn into an ice rune or something," I exclaimed. "Inversion," he wondered. "Can't say that I've ever heard of that." He looked over at the metal rod and saw that it wasn't hot at all. "But nevertheless, it is fixable. Just place the rod over there and I'll fix the forge." I floated the rod to the table as he gestured at it and flew over to the rune. He placed a wingtip on the rune and the flames went out, then removed it and repeated the process to turn it back on. I tried to put the rod down as gently as I could manage, but as soon as it hit the table, it shattered like glass dropping from a 3-story window. "Sorry," I said, looking down at the shattered mess. "How in Atmosia did that happen?" the blacksmith exclaimed. I took a quick note of the phrase and reminded myself to ask Suma about the world's name. "It must have been the cold," I theorized. "The cold broke the rod," he amazed. "I guess if you get anything past a certain temperature, it becomes fragile," I said, using magic to pick up the pieces and place them on the table. Just as I finished picking up the final piece, the nymph said that it would take another few moments for the forge to heat up fully. That was fine with me. I wanted to try something. I closed my eyes and started to focus on the pieces of the shattered rod. "What are you doing?" he asked as I sat on the floor with a small shard of metal in front of me. "Heat is just the atoms of an object vibrating rapidly. I want to see if I can induce that effect without flames. All I really need to do is add energy after all. I explained, with my eyes closed, still focusing on the shard. I pictured flowing mana into the broken bit of metal, and then causing the atoms of the shard to vibrate quicker and quicker until the metal started to glow. I imagined the atoms absorbing the energy of my mana into themselves. Then I heard it. No! How did you do that? I opened my eyes and saw the red-hot shard of metal almost beginning to melt on the floor. End of chapter. Heat. It's just atoms of an object vibrating rapidly. I want to see if I can induce that effect without flames. All I really have to do is add energy after all. I explained with my eyes closed, still focused on the shard. I pictured flowing mana into the broken bit of metal, and then causing the atoms of the shard to vibrate quicker and quicker until the metal started to glow. I imagined the atoms absorbing the energy of my mana into themselves. Then I heard, "Now how'd you do that?" I opened my eyes and saw a red-hot shard of metal, almost beginning to melt on the floor. "I can't believe it worked," I said to myself just before some of the molten metal touched my leg of my trousers and caught on fire. "Ah!" I shouted and jumped. I thought for a moment about creating water to put out the fire, but before my brain had caught up with my plan, my body had already started swatting at my trousers, trying to punch the flames out. In an instant, but it felt much longer, I started stripping off my bottoms. Suddenly, I was hit with a huge splash of water that put out the small flame. I turned around and saw the blacksmith standing on top of the counter and a blue rune glowing behind him. "Ha ha 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 ha!" He cackled in a raspy old voice. "12 years I've had this rune here, and this is still the best investment I've ever made." I looked down at my half-burnt and drowned trousers laying on the ground and wondered to myself how I let that happen. Catch many things on fire, I wondered aloud and picked up my clothes from the ground. I glanced over and saw that the water had cooled off the metal too, as it was now also dripping wet. "I haven't in a while, but yes," he answered and fluttered back to the forging table. "Your garments seem to need repair," the blacksmith pointed out. I stuck a few fingers through the new hole burnt in the leg of the leg inside. "They're easy enough to replace, but it means I need to head home for a while." He nodded his head. "That's fine, I can give you a lesson in metalwork another time." "I'll call Suma and have her send me back. But before I do," I said, and I reached back into the pocket of my ruined jeans and pulled out a piece of paper. I sketched out some designs for the armor I wanted to order. I placed the paper on a nearby table and took a minute to explain everything I wanted and how best to do it. I expected him to be overwhelmed at the thought of making more gear for me, but instead he looked confused. "Jake, what is this material?" he asked. "Oh, you can just make it out of normal metal. It doesn't need to be anything special," I answered him. "No, I mean the strange drawings. What is the white stuff you drew on?" he asked. It took me a moment to realize. I have not even seen a scrap of paper in the entire world. I have been coming and going from this world for months, but I haven't so much as seen a torn shred of it floating in the breeze. It's called paper. On my world, we use it to write stuff down," I said. "What is it made of?" he asked. Wood pulp, I think. Then it gets dissolved in acid, rinsed out, warmed out, and then pressed and left out to dry." I explained what little I knew. "Wow! If you sold this, I bet you can make a lot. It's so much lighter than planks," he exclaimed. "Planks? Right. I'd seen a few Niema carrying planks of thin wood around. I guess the nymphs haven't invented chemistry yet. Nothing I'll pass for now, but maybe in one day," I said, and prepared to call Suma. "Suma, can you send me back home for a bit? I need to change clothes." "Okay, but I'll have to summon you first. Duck down," she said. I was a bit confused, but did it anyway. I said goodbye to the blacksmith and was summoned to an insanely cramped room. My head was touching the ceiling and my knees were on the ground. "What the? Where are we?" "We're in." Suma stopped and looked over me. "Jake, where are the rest of your garments?" "They were burned, so I need to go get new ones," I said. Suma laughed and said she understood, then told me I was currently in her parents' house. "No kidding. I would love to meet them," I told her. "Perhaps after you get dressed," she said, and sent me back. I reappeared back in my room and grabbed a spare set of clothes. I changed everything because I'd been wearing the same outfit for a few days now, just washing them with water magic at night. I looked at the time, and then immediately did a double take when I realized what I saw. It was about lunchtime when I left, but my clock said that it was almost 2 a.m., and several days had passed. End of chapter. Chapter 38.
Perhaps after you get dressed,
she said and sent me back. I reappeared back in my room and grabbed a spare set of clothes. I changed everything because I'd been wearing the same outfit for a few days now, just washing them with water magic at night. I looked at the time and immediately did a double take when I realized what I saw. It was about lunch when I left, but my clock said that it was almost 2 a.m. and that several days had passed. Oh, no, I whispered to myself and suddenly felt my phone start to vibrate over and over again. I pulled it out and saw a message after message appear. I guess my phone's receiving all the messages I missed while I was gone, I thought to myself. By the time it finished receiving messages, over 10 minutes later, I had 27 missed calls and 100 text messages. The first thing I did was get in contact with Suma. Suma, did something happen?
What? Did I send you back to the wrong place?
She asked, confused. No, the wrong time. Remember how I said time doesn't pass or something when you summoned me? Well, this time it did. I left on a Friday, but according to my clock it's now Tuesday, I told her.
Oh, well I guess whatever was causing you to get stopped in time has worn off. I suppose that is a good thing, considering we don't know what was causing it in the first place, she said, looking on the bright side.
Suma, you don't understand. I was in your world for days. That means for almost a week no one could contact me or knew where I was, I tried to explain.
Is that unusual on your world? She asked.
Yes, very. If someone goes missing unexpectedly for one day, we assume that they're kidnapped or killed. I've been gone for almost a week, I said urgently, and beginning to freak out even more than I really was.
That's not good,
Suma said, starting to understand. We talked for a few minutes more, and she did her best to calm me down as I panicked a bit. I could just picture my mum frantically crying into a police officer's chest over me. My stomach was in knots, and I started to get nauseated. I told Suma that I needed to take care of a few things and would contact her after everything was settled. Then I went to my bathroom and threw up. I sat on the floor of my bathroom, thanking my lucky stars that time seems to have at least moved to a 1-to-1 ratio while I was away, rather than something crazy like I was gone for months. Okay, I need to call my mum, I said to myself as I stood up. I turned on my phone and was reminded that it was 2 a.m. No, she'll be asleep. My mum doesn't wake up until 8 o'clock, so until then I unlocked my phone and started going through all 100 messages. Most were from family, but a large amount was from work too. Some of my co-workers and the rest of my boss. I was pretty tired, so I decided to try and get some sleep. But instead, I spent hours laying awake, thinking about what I was going to say to everyone. Hey guys, sorry I went away without telling you. I had to go help my friend fight a Drake and corrupt nobles. Oh, and by the way, my friend is a bird nymph who summons me to another world, and I've nubiously defined magic powers. Surprise! Boom! Straight into the crazy house. Maybe I could say I got kidnapped, I thought aloud. No, then an investigation would get opened up, and that lie would fall apart in a day with my luck. Hours of this went by until finally I passed out around 5 a.m. When I finally woke up, I didn't know how long I had slept for, but I knew it wasn't long enough. I woke up groggy and still slightly sick to my stomach when I realized it wasn't all just a bad dream. My clock, as stupidly bright as it could possibly be to my weary eyes, said that it was 10 a.m. I decided last night that a phone call wasn't going to make up for everything, so I would go to my mum's house as soon as I woke up. I got ready and left as quickly as I could. The drive there was slow and nerve-wracking. I still hadn't thought of convincing a lie, and I doubt that I could fool my mum anyways. She may believe me when it comes to friends she hadn't met like Suma, but disappearing for a few days is completely different. I pulled up to her house and parked the car. By the time I'd gotten out and started walking to the door, she had already heard me and checked to see who it was. Upon realizing it was me, she ran outside and hugged me, crying, "Where have you been?" She wailed and hugged my neck so tightly I actually started to see stars. "I'm sorry, Mum. I didn't really mean to be gone so long," I said sheepishly and hugged her back. We continued hugging for a moment while she sobbed. Finally, she let me go and asked again in a shaky tone, "Jake, where have you been?" I didn't know what to say. She would see right through a lie. Not that I had one anyway, and I couldn't tell her the truth because... Wait. Why couldn't I tell her the truth? I thought to myself. That's kind of hard to explain, but give me a minute to think, and I'll try, I said to her. I need to organize my thoughts. She looked at me funny, but agreed. I closed my eyes and pretended to think, but instead I called Suma. Suma, I said in my head. I knew this method would work, as I'd done it before. Yes, Jake, she answered, sounding sleepy. Do you have anything against me telling my family about you? There was a quiet for a moment, but she answered, No, not that I can think of anyway. Are you considering it? Yeah. Can you summon me and my mum? I asked. 2 people, I could try, she said. Please do. I asked her, and opened my eyes to see my mother very concerned face. Mum, something's about to happen. Don't freak out when it does. Then I hugged her neck. Oh, well, why would you hugging me cause me to freak out, darling? She said, and hugged me back. Then I felt that familiar feeling, like my legs started to fall asleep, and I moved up my body until it hit my arms and head. Then everything went dark. All while this was happening, Mum started to complain that she felt unwell, and she tried to pull away from me. But I only hugged her tighter. Oh, Jake, I think you need to let me go. I'm starting to feel faint. Then I felt her hand let go of my back, and she started to scream, Jake, my hand is gone. With that, we reappeared in Suma's cave. End of chapter. Mum, something's about to happen. Don't freak out when it does. I then hugged her neck. Oh, why would you hugging me cause me to freak out, darling? She said, and hugged me back. Then I felt the familiar feeling, like my legs starting to fall asleep, and I moved up my body until it hit my arms and head. Then everything went dark. All while this was happening, Mum started to complain that she felt unwell, and she tried to pull away from me. But I only hugged her tighter. Oh, Jake, I think you need to let me go. I'm starting to feel faint. Then I felt her hand let go of my back, and she started to scream, Jake, my hand is gone. And with that, we reappeared in Suma's cave. I let her go once we reappeared safely, and she proceeded to freak out in the most British way that I'd ever seen, standing stock still and carefully looking around the room, breathing heavily. She did eventually start speaking again, however. Jake, I think perhaps you should call an ambulance. I seem to be hallucinating. You're not hallucinating, Mum. Everything you thought you saw is happening, I told her calmly, trying to keep her from having a panic attack. She carefully and slowly looked down at her hand with horror in her eyes. Jake, my hand. I saw it vanish, she said, worried. Yes, that happened. But it's back now. I agreed and pointed out. What's happening? She asked. Mum, let me introduce you to Suma, I said, motioning to her. Suma was crouched on the floor, breathing heavily. Are you okay, Suma? I asked once I noticed. That was hard, she said in between her panting. A sparkly bird, my mom asked, confused. But I thought you said Suma was a friend from school. Yes, but to be fair, how was I going to explain this? I said. She quickly looked back and forth between Suma and myself. Ah, I get it, this is a prank, she laughed in denial. Jake, you know how much I disapprove of pranks, but I have to admit that this one is pretty impressive. I shook my head. No, it's not a prank, Mum. It's just, a very long story. She didn't seem to believe me, so I decided to move on and continue with introductions. Anyway, Mum, like I said, this is Suma, and Suma, this is my mum. Nice to meet you, Suma said. I looked over at Mum, but she didn't seem convinced. Then it hit me. Mum, what do you hear Suma saying? I asked, and then she looked at me confused. Sounds like a bird. Why is it glittery? You didn't pour glitter on this poor thing, did you? She scolded. No, Mum, I turned to Suma. Suma, what did you hear my mum saying? Well, kind of like barks and grunts, honestly, she said after finally catching her breath and standing up straight again. Needless to say, I was annoyed. I didn't exactly want to spend this whole time acting as an intermediary between a woman who thought I was going crazy and Suma. Suma, how did you get me to understand you when we first met? Or rather, third met, I asked. I linked with you and showed you my memories. That's all I know. I never figured out how we actually ended up understanding one another's languages, she told me. While Suma and I talked, my mum looked on with worry and awkwardness. Okay, well, let's try that, I said. Mum, Suma's going to enter your mind and show you some of her memories. We think that it'll allow you to learn a language, but we aren't sure. Jake, I think we need to both go to the hospital, she said, putting a gentle hand on my shoulder. Trust me, Mum, don't freak out when it starts, okay? You'll be fine, I told her before telling Suma to begin. She bowed her head and raised her wings, and then a magic circle formed under her and Mum. I wasn't privy to the memories, but I could guess what was happening based on my Mum's reaction.
Jake, what is happening?
She gasped. How far should I show her, Jake? She wondered. Just show her up to a point where I accepted being your familiar, I suggested.
What is that monster?
My Mum asked. She was probably at the part with the B.R.E. Her hands covered her mouth as she looked as if she was going to be sick. I should have expected this part, honestly. Mum hates violence, and she can't handle gore. She never wanted to watch action movies on a family night when I was growing up. It's why I've seen 13 going on 37 times. She jumped. Goodness, Jake, where on earth did you get a gun? I rented it at the shooting range, I said, but I wasn't actually sure she could hear me since she didn't respond. Okay, we're almost done, Suma said, and the magic circle that she'd created started to fade. So, can you hear her now? I asked.
Jake, what was that?
My Mum asked, shaking.
I think it worked,
Suma said. Mum looked over at her shocked. That bird just spoke. End of chapter. Chapter 40.
So, you can hear her now?
I asked.
Jake, what was that?
Mum asked, shaking. I think it worked, Suma said. Mum looked over at her shocked.
That bird just spoke.
You know, I think you're right, I joked to Suma. Mum, allow me to finally, and this time properly, introduce you to Suma.
Hi,
Suma chirped happily.
Jake, that sparkly bird has psychic powers, and it can speak.
Mum repeated herself. I turned to Suma. I think she's in shock. Let's give her a minute to process. We waited for a few more moments while Mum came to grips with what was happening and with what she saw in Suma's memories.
So, the Suma you told me about is a bird, and it can use magic, and it has psychic powers,
Mum eventually said. Pretty much, I confirmed.
What's a bird?
Suma asked over the private link. It's a small winged animal from my planet that can fly, I replied. The Nyama do look very similar to one.
And, you work for her, Jake?
Mum asked. Sort of, yeah. We're partners, and I'm a familiar, I explained.
And this is where you've been for the last few days, she wondered, fighting those creatures. I only showed her up to the first encounter with the B.R.E. She doesn't know about the nobles or the Drake,
Suma said over our link. Well, that was just a one time. Really, I've just been helping her train and return as she's been teaching me how to use magic like her. I lied.
But it didn't work, Jake. I'm your mother.
I always know when you're lying to me. Now tell me the truth. Is she mind-controlling you to do this? To fight these things? I couldn't tell if she was asking me that or Suma.
Jake, what's your mother's name?
Suma asked. It's Susan Vandal, I told her.
Miss Vandal, Jake is strong and smart, not to mention incredibly powerful. There is nothing to worry about.
Even if on the off chance that we ever were attacked, they would be no match for Jake. Suma tried to reassure her, but I could tell that it wasn't working by the annoyed look forming on Mum's face. Mum, you saw her memories. Suma can't control me. She tried years ago and failed, I said. But as soon as it left my mouth, I regretted it.
And that's another thing,
she said, staring to shout hysterically. Why are you working with her if she tried to control you? She kidnapped you and forced you to fight a dangerous monster. Why team up with her if you aren't mind-controlled? I admitted that was, a bit of a hurdle, but I've long since forgiven Suma for that, and we've moved past it, I said. Miss Vandal, I would never do that to Jake again, and I couldn't even if I wanted to, Suma said. Things were getting heated, and Mum wasn't calming down.
How many times have you had to fight like that, Jake? And don't try lying again, Mum pressed.
I sighed, relenting, knowing I wouldn't be able to fool her. Including the one she saw in Suma's memories. 3 times. She glares at Suma with hatred-filled eyes.
You've made my baby boy risk his life 3 times!
No, Mum. It's not like that. I saved her from the nobles who were attacking her. I tried to calm her.
Show me,
my mum demanded. I want to see. If you have the ability to show me memories, then I want to see.
That's not a good idea,
Suma said reluctantly. Mum, calm down, I told her. That was a mistake. I am calm, she shrieked. Suma recoiled at Mum screaming. Send her back, I said to Suma over a private channel. I can't unless you're touching her. But are you sure it's wise? Won't that make her madder? Suma asked. I hugged Mum around the neck. Do it. I'll deal with the fallout at home, I said to Suma.
What are we about to?
Mum started to say, but we disappeared before she could finish. Mum and I reappeared back outside her house, and it took another few hours of talking with her and explaining what was going on before she finally started to settle down.
I'm just so scared for you, Jake.
I know, Mum. I was scared too at first. But being with Suma, going to her world, is the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me. A little danger isn't going to stop me from living out the greatest adventure that I've ever been on, I explained. She stayed quiet for a while.
You've been through so much, and in such a short amount of time.
Well, it's actually been a while from my point of view. For some reason, until recently, whenever I traveled to her world, time would stop or something. Or maybe I was just getting placed back from when I left. I don't know. But I do know that it didn't do it the last time. That's why I was missing for so long. I spent a few days over there, I told her. Mum asked a few more questions, and I answered what I could. She asked about Suma and why she wanted a familiar. She asked how it was possible that magic was real. And finally, she asked the big question.
So, what happens now?
Now, I go see if I still have a job. If I do, then I think it's best if I quit. If I don't, then I think I come back up with a lie and at least give them some closure, I said. Mum and I said goodbye, and she asked me to apologize to Suma for her behavior for her. Then I went straight to work. End of chapter. This is a special thank you to the one, the only, the legendary Eric Hino, who has become the only Tier 6 patron. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Australia the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudic Yol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.